Our first item is the consent agenda. Consent agenda items are expected to be routine and non-controversial and will be acted upon by the council at one time without discussion. Any council member, staff member, or interested parties may request that an item be removed from the consent agenda for further discussion. Are there any council members that would like to remove any items from the consent agenda?
Madam Chair, I would like to remove item number 1, number 3, and number 4.
Number 1, 3,
I have a
and
few
4. Okay, then I'll,
basic questions.
okay. In that, I will ask for a motion on the remaining items, number 2 and number 5.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion by Councilmember Heminger and a second by Councilmember Combs to approve consent agenda items number 2 and number 5. All in favor signify by aye.
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 One abstention.
One abstention. Passes on a 5, 1 abstention. Is that correct?
Is Jim
Okay.
the abstention? Or is Mike?
One.
I wasn't here for the
Right.
meeting.
He wasn't here. Okay.
Madam Chairman, the reason I asked that item 1 be pulled, let's see, it would be on page 2 of the minutes down under city report. I think there's a correction in one of the statements made by Mr. Hannum, and that is the last sentence. The city council has voted to relinquish the Highway 49 bridge. I believe that's the Vallecito Road Bridge, not the Highway 49 bridge. I
Right.
checked with the city clerk this morning, and that should be corrected. That was the only comment I had about the minutes.
I'll make a motion
Okay.
to approve the minutes as amended.
Have
Second.
a second. Who's second?
I'll second.
Have a motion by Councilmember Ponte and a second by Councilmember Combs to approve the minutes as amended. All in favor signify by aye.
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 Passes on a 5-0, 1 abstention.
One abstention. Thank you.
Okay, then you want to go on to item,
I just had a couple of questions
Number
under consent item number 3, and that's on page 2. There's a brief summation of Fund 6150 account, and right now it shows a negative balance of 51,633, and then under the description, it says, in processing 2 installment payments of $149,000 change each, was charged 3 times in error. So my question is, with that error corrected, does that now leave that fund in a positive condition?
Yes, the correction wasn't able to be posted until January 2nd in 2015. So as of December 31st, it does show as a negative balance.
Right, okay. But that was just a momentary glitch.
Yes, I submitted 2 installments and the auditor's office posted 3 in error, but they've already corrected it.
Okay. And then if you go to, I guess, page 2 of the expenditure charts, where it's entitled Account Summary Budget to Actual as of 12/31/14. It shows at the bottom line, the net council of government expenditures is 123% midway through the year, and I'm guessing that we're overspent only because of the perhaps timing of revenues and expenditures.
That 123% is taking the fund balance from the budgeted to the actuals. That's not reflective of the individual object codes. So we are spending the 77.13. on the line above. So
Oh.
the second portion is, transfers in, and then the fund net. Do you see what I'm saying on that bottom portion?
Yeah, no, I see that.
Okay, so the 123 isn't an accurate, it's, reflection, the 77.13.
Okay. So I guess for mid-year, though, our expenses are exceeding revenues slightly at the midpoint in the budget.
No, 77.13 is what is remaining.
Oh, remaining, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay.
I had the same panic. I reviewed it too,
Okay.
and Melissa had the same conversation with me.
I get it, thank you.
No problem.
You're not alone.
Okay. Is that it?
Well, I can ask my question on consent item number 4 at this time if you want.
Do we have to have a motion on?
That item 3 was
That's just
informational,
informational.
unless there's any more questions from the council or members of the public on that item.
On consent item number 4, though, I guess that is an item that needs to be approved. And I was just curious, on the back page of the staff report, in your little chart matrix, you list the three transit projects in a certain order, and then when you look at the resolution, they're listed in a different order. Is there anything significant about that change? Or-
Not significant at all. That was a mistake on my part. I was finishing the staff report and it was just
Okay, all right,
overlooked that.
okay.
But yeah, that doesn't, the order in which they are listed
Has
has
no
significance.
effect on the priority? Okay.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That was the only question I had there.
Okay. So then, I need a motion on that, on item number 4.
Excuse me,
So I would make motion.
Wait.
Oh,
Robert
Mr.
Packinger,
Packinger.
Public Works. I had a couple questions.
Okay.
In terms of the mobility management planner duties, I'm looking at page, what's noted here as 76, and it has a listing of projects, and it talks about priority capital and operating project list. There are some items in there that are currently being performed by the County Public Works Department. For example, under highest priority, we're talking about the implementation of the items in the short-range transit plan update and the maintenance evaluation.
I can actually clarify that real quickly. This is an excerpt from the Coordinated Public Transit Human Services Transportation Plan that we adopted in June of 2014. And these actually are implementation strategies that were identified to improve transit for older adults and persons with disabilities and low-income individuals. And so these priority capital and operating project lists is actually for the whole county, for nonprofit, for public agencies, for Calaveras Transit to coordinate on to implement these strategies. So it's not meant for the mobility manager to have control, or these are not their tasks that will be implemented just by the mobility manager.
So the whole point of the position is to do exactly what you're saying, Robert, is kind of eliminate that redundancy, focus on roles and responsibilities of the various agencies providing transportation services throughout the county, and then facilitate that coordination. And then I think also be a resource within the community so that we can connect people who need a ride and maybe Calaveras Transit isn't the best fit for them with the resource programs that offer transportation. So that was really the focus of the mobility management. And the other priority areas, I think, is just illustrative of more work to be done by everyone.
But these are not items that will be handled then by the mobility plan.
As in the table provided in the staff report, it shows coordinated plan priority that will be implemented through those 3 projects. And that refers to this excerpt from the coordinated plan. So the mobility management is implementation of highest priority number 1, which is establish a mobility management coordination function and leadership. And then Common Ground Senior Services is implementing highest priority number 3 and 4 out of that list.
And just so you're aware, Robert, we did this position as a contract position, so it's an opportunity to get funding to meet one of the objectives in the coordinated human services, but it's a contracted position. So that position could be within the Public Works Department, it could be within the existing Calaveras transit infrastructure. It's not going to be a full-time COG employee.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions on this item? And I'll ask for a motion on consent agenda item number 4, resolution number fiscal year 1521.
Make a motion to approve?
I'll second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Conti and a second by Councilmember Khan to approve Resolution 1521, certifying FTA 5310 grant application. All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes on a 6-0 voted council. We'll move on to item number 5, or number 6 is public comment. 5 minutes per person. Comments shall be limited to items of interest to the public that are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the council, Government Code Section 54954.3A. I'll open the public comment, and if there's someone that would like to address the council, please step to the podium. No one wants to address the council? I'll close the public comment, and we'll move on to item number 7, which is a minute order approving the appointment of the chair and vice chair for calendar year 2015. And at that point, I will ask if there are any nominations.
Madam Chair, I would like to nominate John Gomes as the new incoming chairperson for the COG. In the 2 years that I've sat next to John, I've found that he's a great communicator. He's a great consensus builder. The time we spent together on the ad hoc committee looking at salaries, I was very impressed with his thought process and the way he helped build consensus amongst the board, and I think he'd be a very good chairperson.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. I have a motion by Councilmember Combs and a second by Councilmember Ponte to appoint John Gomes as the chair of the COG for calendar year 2015. All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
One abstention. One abstention.
One
I just met John.
abstention. You can vote on that, can't you?
Well, I could, but I think John understands.
Okay.
No problem. Thank you.
All in favor signify by aye. We did that, didn't we?
Aye.
1,
Yep.
2, 3, 4, 5. Passes on a 5-1 vote of the council. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I will hand over the gavel and everything to you at this point.
We can stay seated where we are.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. Here.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Oh, we got
Council.
to do a vice chair.
Yeah.
Do we have a nomination for the vice chair? Director Heminger?
I'd like to nominate Elaine for vice chair, if
Elaine?
she'll accept.
We have to see if we get a second.
Is there a second?
I will second that nomination.
Okay. Are there any other nominations for vice chair? All those in favor of having Elaine serve as vice chair signify by saying aye.
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 Well, thank you.
One
Got a-
abstention.
A good vice chair.
I just met you, Elaine.
Okay.
All right,
Well,
that's fine.
a 5-0-1 vote. The next order of business is the citizen member appointment process. We have several applicants, I believe, and why don't we start with Melissa Eads? Why don't you go ahead and introduce the
Perfect.
item and ask for the...
Well, I would say that staff recommends that you hear the presentations from the interested member applicants. Unfortunately, I have to report to the council that Warwick Weber has just pulled his application from consideration. So we have one applicant. Justin is here this evening from West Point. We were hopeful that through this recruitment process, we would have one citizen member appointed, and we'd have the opportunity for the appointment of an additional citizen member alternate. Kate has let us know that she'll be taking a maternity leave towards the end of her term. But my recommendation for the council is to interview the remaining citizen member applicant. His resume is included for council consideration. And then I would recommend the appointed city and county officials are the voting members of this decision. So with that, I'm happy to entertain any questions that you might have about the process. But Board of Supervisors, City Council members on the COG board, you are the voting members in the appointment of the citizen members. We've provided also, just for some background, a few sample interview questions that we use pretty consistently throughout the year. You're free to ask your own questions and then also ask questions of the applicant, and those questions may prompt more, so it's at your discretion.
Just one brief question before we get started. Can you remind us all of the expiration dates of John Gomez's term and Jim Hemiger's?
Sure,
Sure.
Carly has that information, she'll provide the
Yeah, they both
update.
expired January 2016.
Who does?
Both of them
Both of them?
expired January 2016.
So we will now have,
Terms.
after the process tonight, we will have 3 community members all expiring at the same time?
And the newly appointed member tonight will expire January 2017.
Oh, 17.
Yeah, they'll stagger.
I don't think it states that in the resolution.
So-
On the minute order, it states December 2016, I believe.
Right, just expiring December 31st, 2016.
Correct.
Right, perfect.
All right, so we'll have 2 going off at the end of 2016, 1 expiring in 2017.
Yes.
Okay.
Justin, why don't we have you come up and give your presentation, and then from that, I may answer any questions or some of the questions we might have to begin with.
Okay. Hello, my name is Justin Catalano. I chose to take this position. I'd like to learn more about the community. My background is in automotive technology, so I feel I have a strong reference point to make decisions, and I've never actually been a part of a council like this, but I'm young and I would like to do this for quite some time and learn about the process and the different ways to get funding and to just make the community a better place.
All right. Council members, do you have any questions you'd like to ask of Justin?
In your resume, you indicate prior experience with Exactly Enterprise Incorporated.
Yes.
What exactly did that company do?
It is a medical cannabis dispensary in San Francisco.
Debbie?
Can you expand a little bit about your transit experience?
Yeah. So I guess I started out as a technician. I'm a Ford certified technician, and I did that for quite a few years. Doing that and being a technician, it's a hard job. It's hard on your body. So I decided that after a few years of that, I should probably go back to school and get a bachelor's degree so that I could basically either own my own business or not have to work so hard later on in life. And that brought me into working for New Jersey Transit, And at that company, I served as a manager. I was in charge of a couple different bus garages, and basically I handed out work to the technicians there, made decisions when buses broke down on what to do, people to send out to get them. Basically, kept track of the work orders, entered stuff into the computer, made sure that the services that needed to get done got done in a timely fashion. Jobs were done correctly. If technicians needed help diagnosing problems, I would help them. And basically, from that point, I gained a lot of good management experience. In 2010, my friend opened up this business in San Francisco, and he gave me a call, and he asked if I could help him out. And it was an opportunity, basically, of a lifetime. The cannabis industry it's kind of new territory. It's been around for thousands of years. And California is at the forefront of it, and I felt that it was an opportunity that would give me good experience helping a friend start a business from the ground up to see if I actually could operate my own business. And California is a beautiful place. I wanted to try it out, and I came out here. We did excellent, and at this point, I made the decision to leave that company last summer. I had a son, and I wanted to help be a full-time father, and so I've done that, and I'm ready to get back to work. So at this point, I actually rented a building in Valley Springs, and I'm in the process of going through the permit process to open a medical cannabis dispensary in Valley Springs. And that's my project for money, and my background is still very strong into the transportation industry, so I felt that I could help out where I have a professional background as well, and see where that takes me as well.
So your experience in transit then is in the operational side in regards to overall maintenance
It's
of
in the
the
maintenance
fleets
department,
and that
yes.
sort of thing? Okay, thank you.
I have one question. Have you had any prior experiences or any public service on any public boards, commissions, or anything
I have not.
serving the public? in
I
any
have
way?
not. I volunteered to help Frank Lautenberg of New Jersey do some political campaigning and such when I was younger, but no real citizen member stuff.
Elaine?
I would ask, how would the COG benefit from your participation?
The COG would benefit from my participation. I'm very organized, I'm dedicated, and I'm very interested in the different transportation projects that are going on. I feel that with my background, I have a good cost analysis of how much things should be, how long jobs should take, and I feel that would be a help in a county that seems to be growing pretty rapidly. In my time here, it's only been about 8 months, but it looks like Valley Springs is growing pretty greatly, I live out here, so I feel that with the growth and expansion of this county, that transportation is basically the lifeblood of the world. Goods and services get moved around with trucks and people get moved around with buses. People get to and from places with their cars. And in a county like this, where it's spread out, that's pretty much the way people are going to get around. And as more people come, there's going to be more projects that come about to make those decisions on if we're putting new roads, if they're putting lights in places. I see in the agenda that there's a lot of things for the Calaveras Transit, and that's something that I'm very interested in learning about out here. I have a fascination for automobiles, trucks, and buses, and I feel I can have good input on certain things.
Mike?
In your automotive background, did you have any specialty certifications other than a technician? I'm a little familiar with that background, and I know that you can obtain certifications in specific areas.
Well, when I went to school, I went to a program that was called the Ford Asset Program. So Ford sponsored the community college that I went to. I am almost a completely Ford certified master technician. I'm missing maybe 10 certifications from factory training, and that is due to the fact that I don't work at a Ford dealership anymore. I did take quite a few ASE tests. At this point, they have expired because the past about 7 to 8 years, I've been in management, and I just haven't been taking those tests any longer because I enjoy supervising and working with my brain more than working with my hands. I like working with my hands for my own personal self, but not problems that people have.
Thank you.
Any further questions from the board?
I just have one. Obviously, the most applicable experience that you bring to this board is your experience in transit operations and so forth, but you do realize that we are a planning body and mostly a advisory policy body. We don't get involved in day-to-day operations of the transit operations, or we micromanage transit operations. We manage and oversee from a distance.
Yes, I understand that, and I like the overall bigger picture of life and the benefit it's going to be to mankind. Not so much nitpicking on day-to-day operations, just what's best for the community and what's best for the future.
Councilmember Ponte?
Pretty much Councilmember Calm kind of answered or asked my question, so I'm fine.
Okay.
All right. Just as a point of order, one of the components of the citizen member selection is number 2, where there should not be 2 citizen members from the same supervisorial district or the City of Angels serving on the COG unless approved by the member agency's governing body. So I just want to make that known that Director Heminger is already from the West Point area. Just be aware that you are approving 2 folks from the West Point region. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying that it's something to be noted as part of the guidelines that we have to serve under. It's okay, we're just making note of it.
Colony Hill, which
It's the same supervisory district, correct?
I think it is, yes, but
So the only requirement is if this board appointed, then we would need to go before the city council and before the county board of supervisors to get approval for that before we could accept that action as final.
I don't see the first page of this amendment, but isn't it just the Board of Supervisors?
I believe it's was the board of supervisors and city. It says approved by the member agencies governing board. Okay, I'm sorry, Jim. Thank you. Thank you for the clarification. So the member agencies, so it would be the county board of supervisors in this case.
Clarification. Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
That last statement stated that we can or cannot, or that's just guidelines?
We can vote to approve Justin's application to be a citizen member tonight, and the clarification is because it would be 2 members from the same supervisorial district, we then need to go back to the Board of Supervisors and ask for a final blessing from the Calaveras County Board of Supervisors approving this action.
And my understanding, that's the situation we have now?
That is correct. Any further comments from the board? Questions? As this is an action item only voted on by the members from the Board of Supervisors and the City of Angels on this board, I'd need a motion from one of you four and the second from one of you four to move forward.
So I'm going to make a motion to appoint our applicant, Justin, to the COG board pending final okay from the Board of Supervisors.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion?
Public comment?
Public comment? Thank you, Jim. Seeing none, I'll call.
Can we speak to the motion?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I personally would like to have choices. I'm disappointed that Mr. Rourke withdrew his application. I would have liked to have seen more interest in the position, and I don't see any compelling reason to make an appointment at this time, so I'm going to vote against the motion, and I would like to see more recruitment, perhaps advertised in a different manner. I'm not sure what it's going to take to bring out more candidates, but I'd like choices.
Any further discussion? Call for the motion. All those in favor saying aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye, or oppose?
Opposed.
And abstentions? I guess there would be none. It's a 2-2.
2-2.
At this time then, we want to thank you for your interest. We'll continue to open the citizen appointment per the direction of the council members, and we hope that we haven't lost your interest, but that we would encourage you to continue in the process and look forward to this continuing on in the future.
Thank you. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 9, the Calaveras Transit Maintenance and Organizational Analysis Working Paper Follow-Up Presentation for Institutional Options by Cliff Chambers, Mobility Partners.
Good evening, council. This item is informational. It's a presentation of transit organizational options for council discussion. This item addresses findings from the Transit Organizational and Maintenance Analysis Working Paper. That's a part of the Short Range Transit Plan, which we are currently in the process of. I'd like to introduce Cliff Chambers with Mobility Planners. He's our consultant for the Short Range Transit Plan, and he'll kind of guide us through the presentation, give us an overview of how we got here, quickly, quick snapshot, and then we'll go through the pros and cons of the different institutional options specific to Calaveras County. So I'll pass it on to the Chambers.
Thank you, Amber. So this is a follow-up from the workshop that we had in September of last year, where I made a presentation based on the working paper that was distributed at the time, which talked through the maintenance and organizational analysis. And what I'm going to do tonight, since we do have one new member here, is to give you just an overview of what we talked about last time, some of the key findings, and where what we didn't get to last time was talking through some of the institutional options in terms of doing business in a different way. So the main purpose of tonight is to talk through what those institutional options are for doing business with Calaveras Transit in a different way, and what are some of the key considerations as a board that you would like to look at over time. So at the September 2014 workshop, we went over, we examined basically the Calaveras Transit costs, and those costs had gone up from $69.85 in 2008-09 to $114.51 in fiscal year 2012-13. So we did a detailed analysis and the breakdown of the costs and what the trends are for those costs, and we did a peer analysis of 9 different transit agencies that are small rural transit agencies in California, and compared those costs. And then we looked at potential strategies that could be implemented in these different cost areas. And the county has made actually quite a bit of momentum over the last 9 months in addressing several of those. But at the time, we went through between March and September of 2014. So I'm going to be talking a lot about operating cost per vehicle service hour. And essentially the definition of that is what it costs to run Calaveras Transit for 1 hour while it's in revenue service, which means that it's open and available for passengers to pay a fare. That's the definition of the cost per vehicle service hour. Vehicle service hour is the same when the bus is available for a fare-paying passenger. I just want to give a little bit of historical background to provide the context. The green line here tracks the actual cost per vehicle out on this axis here. So this is an institutional analysis looking at the institutional options. In 2005-06, Calaveras Transit Management changed from the COG to the county. And then over time, these are some of the milestones. A new contractor, MB Maintenance, was the maintenance and operations contractor. Paratransit Services started operations here, and the county started the Calaveras Transit Maintenance. So it's climbed, the costs per hour per operating the 1 hour service has climbed quite substantially over the last several years. The other red line is essentially in terms of the amount of services that are being provided in the vehicle service hours. So at one time, Calaveras Transit provided service down to Lodi. During the Great Recession, there was a significant cutback. That's that big drop in the red line between 08, 09 and 9-10. And then services have flattened out. So that kind of gives you the overall perspective. Costs have been going up, and the actual supply of services has been going down in the last several years. So why does all this matter? It's because essentially for an operating budget that's about $1 million a year, the cost in 2012-13 for Calaveras Transit was $114.51 per vehicle service hour. That allows you to provide a little over 8,700 vehicle service hours to operate the service. The average for the 9 peers that we looked at is about $85.58, and if you had that cost, you'd actually be able to operate 11,000, almost 700 vehicle service hours, about 33% more service. So I've just basically submitted an administrative draft of service alternatives. So one of the things that we did an onboard survey as part of this process, talked to passengers. One thing that they'd really like to see in terms of service improvement was Saturday service. So with the current cost structure, with, it's, with the same budget, you're not able to do it. If you had a different cost structure, you probably could provide that Saturday service if the cost structure was a little bit different. So that's why it's overall quite important. As I mentioned, and I went in a lot more detail in the presentation in September on the peer analysis that we did, there's essentially in the transit business, there's two different types of operations. There's basically contract services, which you have a contract with Paratransit Services to actually provide the day-to-day operations. That's the contracted services. Many agencies, like a county, will then directly hire the drivers, for example. That's called directly operated services. So there's two distinguishing things, and as you can see, the average cost of contract services is about $16 less than directly operated services when it's actually everything is operated by the county. Calaveras Transit is different than most transit agencies in that the operations are contracted, but the maintenance is done through the county. So it's kind of a hybrid between the two. So last time in September we went through a more detailed explanation of all the various cost components, but I just to say the operator fixed costs, the operator variable costs are the costs that are being provided by your contractor, Paratransit Services, and that represents about 59% of your total budget. The fixed costs are things like the manager, the supervision of the service, the dispatchers, the building rental, insurance, things like that. Those are fixed costs. The variable costs are essentially more like the driver cost. It just varies depending on how much service you supply. Those are the variable costs. The maintenance cost is about 17%, and the administrative costs are about, we're in 12-13, about 12%. So in September, we went in quite a bit of detail in terms of the various strategies that we were suggesting, and broken down by those various cost factors. So the county is in the process of renegotiating the contract with Paratransit Services. The contract currently ends at the end of June of 2015. But we're working on, the contract says you can extend it for 2 one-year periods, up to 2 one-year periods. They're in the process of doing that. So the county has gotten approval for new intercity services down to Stockton, which will provide more hours and extending Burson. Those increased number of hours will spread out the cost of the fixed costs, depending on how the negotiations go in terms of the contract extension. So that's one strategy for bringing down the cost. Another strategy that's discussed is the feasibility of owning the operations and maintenance facility. Now it's rental cost. If it's purchased through a capital procurement, then you reduce those costs. We looked at operator variable cost and particularly adjusting driver wages for new drivers, but really concluded that this was something that there was not a lot that could be done to bring down the cost structure. In terms of maintenance costs, there's been a lot of activity. Just before the meeting, I found that the county has gotten delivery now on 2 new buses. The buses were beyond their useful life, and that will bring down the actual maintenance cost per vehicle service mile an hour. They've hired a fleet manager with transit experience. They're exploring the potential of going back to contract operation, and I'm sure that might be part of the conversations they're having with Paratransit Services in the negotiation. And then we had a transit maintenance expert do an evaluation, and one of the things we found that they really needed to establish some maintenance goals and objectives as part of that process. Then in terms of transit administration, we looked at strategies in terms of every transit agency has certain functions in terms of finance, procurement, marketing, a whole host of activities, and really encourage the county to work with Paratransit Services, the contractor, to see what's the best division of responsibilities so that you can do the job in the most effective and economical way. And then we also looked at, renewed capital project delivery in terms of, things like bus stop improvements. The county has had quite a bit of capital money, and the project service delivery for capital projects has, over the last few years, been fairly slow. It's recently picked up, but it's something, again, that's part of the transit administration. And then basically, and a really important part of any transit operation is the skills and experience of the transit manager. And the transit manager here has, recently I attended a conference at CalAct. She's getting training, she's taking courses, she's getting a lot of those skills. But this is something that institutionally is really important to have, the skills and experience for a transit operation. So we looked at basically, so that finishes essentially what we presented in September. We've updated some of the performance statistics, recently received the 2013-14 financial audit. And basically this shows in the bottom line is that the operating cost per vehicle service hour between 12-13 and 13-14 is now flattened out. We saw in that green line quite a large rise. That has, at least between those 2 years, is flattened out. But still, the fare box recovery ratio, which is the fare revenue that's received through the fare box divided by the operating cost, that ratio is required by state law to be 10% or above. So still below fare box recovery, and one of the reasons that it is because of the increased operating cost per vehicle service hour. I'm also saying that in 12-13 and 13-14, actually the operating costs for Calaveras County were lower than normal because they didn't have a county employee as a transit manager. They contracted it out to a part-time contractor. So the actual administrative costs during those two periods of time were actually lower than they would normally be. And I believe there was a report to the Board of Supervisors on the first quarter operating statistics for 2014-15, which unfortunately the ridership had actually dropped from the same quarter in the previous year. The service effectiveness had declined in part because there was an extension of Route 1 service to Rancho Calaveras, but overall ridership dropped. So it dropped the productivity, which is measured by the number of passengers per 1 hour that you're doing. It's called passenger per vehicle service hour. And then the operating cost statistics actually also declined. So then the 14-15 vehicle cost per vehicle service hour, in terms of the budgeted amount, when you take out the capital assets and fare reimbursements, things like survey and capital cost, is actually around $130 an hour. So we looked at the first quarter costs and made some adjustments based on some things that weren't included in the quarterly expense report, and it comes out to about $121 per vehicle service hour. Now these are just preliminary figures. We don't really know what the audited cost in 14-15. We haven't closed the year out. But the trends are such that the cost per vehicle service hour will continue to go up in 14-15. And quite honestly, I think the first year that really can have an effect on this will be in 15-16 after the new vehicles arrive. They've gone through the process of renegotiating the contract with Paratransit Services, and that will be the critical year. So,
Cliff, if I might just add a point to the discussion of the budget. We had a discussion about this, I think, internally as staff, and why this slide was so important to me is that we've been working directly with county staff on the budget, and I believe they plan on bringing forward to the County Board of Supervisors a budget amendment for the transit budget. And one of the things that we've been asking them to do is make the correlation to your budget and the expenditures and what it looks like from this perspective and vehicle service hour costs. And so they will be bringing an amendment to the Board of Supervisors, and I hope that this is information that can support the need for that amendment when it comes before you.
So, kind of a summary before I get into the institutional options. Costs have increased in terms of the cost per vehicle service hour. And despite the growth in ridership, the fare increase and increase in fare revenues, there still is a struggle to meet the minimum fare box recovery requirement of 10% required by state law. The operations contractor fixed cost is the highest amount, and the county is taking several steps to look at that and expand service down to Stockton, and I think that is an area that has potential for addressing some of the structural issues. The county is in the process of replacing the fleet, I should say, and has taken a number of steps, including hiring a fleet manager who has some transit experience and making some various positive improvements in that area. But up until 9 months ago, really, the governance and transit administration had really not received the attention that it really deserves over time. And that's how, in a lot of ways, decisions were made that allowed the cost per vehicle service hours to increase so steeply. But there's different ways that different organizations do business. And so the rest of the presentation, providing this background context, is really on the institutional options and different ways of doing business. And so the working paper that I presented in September has more details in here, but I'm going to go through this in summary form, and I'm going to stop at the end of each of these 5 options, and if you have questions, it would be a good time to discuss. I've done work for transit agencies around California for each of these different types of organizational options. So if you have more detailed questions, would like more information, clarification, please feel free to ask, and we can do this in as informal way as possible. So there's 5 essential options. Retaining essentially Calaveras County as the transit administrator. There's many agencies that have a separate joint powers authority as a transit agency in conjunction with the Council of Government, and I'm going to be talking about that and giving you examples for each of these. Some agencies hire a professional transit management firm to actually provide the transit administration. Others form a joint powers authority, but instead of contracting for the services like you do with Paratransit Services, they directly hire. The joint powers authority actually hires the drivers, the mechanics, they hire all the necessary personnel for that purpose, and I'm going to give you an example of that. And then finally, there's a regional transit authority where Tuolumne, Calaveras, and Amador counties would jointly form a joint powers authority. Okay, so for the first alternative is basically retaining Calaveras County as the governing authority. For all these alternatives, I'm really going to present, what are the features that make that particular alternative work the best. So for that, really, the Board of Supervisors would have to provide accountability and leadership and oversight over time to really make sure that costs are kept under control, the service is operating effectively and efficiently. part of that is really with the transit manager who has or develops, many areas it's developed over time, the prerequisite skills and experience to manage a very, it is a very complex operation with a lot of regulations that need to be met. There needs to really be strong support from Public Works management over time. There needs to be good project delivery, great communication with key partners, because it's not just the transit agency, it's part of the community, it's part of the fabric of the community. It's really important to work with local partners. It's really important to have maintenance as an ongoing priority with full regulatory compliance. And part of the short-range transit plan, we're going to be making service and other kinds of recommendations that those are planned. Those and the county is already, as I said before, making progress in a number of areas in implementing identified strategies that we've been working on as part of this planning process. Trinity Transit is an example of where this has worked really well. I did a project for them, a short-range transit plan about 18 months ago. They have a very good transit manager. Their system the last several years has doubled ridership. They have fare box recovery of about 14%, and it has worked quite well. And it is a very good example of how where the county is in the lead, and this system can work really well.
Excuse me, Cliff.
Yeah.
Under this scenario where you had the transit manager has to develop prerequisite skills and experience, is that a county employee?
Yes.
Under that scenario, this would all be county employee?
Yes.
Running up?
Yes.
Okay.
Question?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess this relates a little bit to one of the previous summary of key findings to date. You said up until 9 months ago, governance and transit administration hadn't received the attention and professional guidance it needed.
Yes.
What does that mean? Who's the governance and who's the transit administration?
Well, the
Who's
governing body
guidance?
for Calaveras Transit is the Board of Supervisors.
Right.
And the transit administration has been historically the Public Works Department. And basically, in my more detailed presentation in September, there were a number of decisions that were made that back up that statement. For example, the county decided that they wanted to take maintenance in-house and originally estimated that it would cost $50,000. Instead, the actual costs were more like $165,000. So there was really not a lot of questions, enough questions that were asked when that decision was made. Is just one example is what I'm talking about.
And you said up until 9 months ago, so...
So 9 months ago...
Excuse me, let me...
Oh, sorry.
Does that mean then the Board of Supervisors and Public Works now, you feel, is getting the attention and professional guidance it deserves?
Well, I mean, I think as I said before in one of my slides, my next slide actually, is that there has been really recent positive momentum, in my opinion, in terms of what I have seen. And it really will depend on the outcome of a lot of the strategies that we were talking about before. For example, and there was for example, they have hired through the COG funding somebody to help assist them with transit expertise in the negotiation with paratransit services to make sure that it's done in with transit expertise and knowledge about that contract negotiations. To me, that's a very positive thing that is happening. It's a very positive thing that they're replacing the vehicles, taking steps in the maintenance area. So there has been some positive momentum, but there's still a lot, just looking at the budgeting process right now, there still needs to be a lot done, and that has to be done in 15, 16, and really look at this really carefully. That's what I'm referring to.
And I think from staff's perspective, we've been working with Public Works for a number of years with a number of recommendations and findings. And I think as new leadership has begun to circulate throughout the department, we've seen more attention and focus being given transit I think especially since we worked in partnership with them on the release of this transit maintenance and organizational analysis. I think it required that COG staff and Public Works staff really take a close look at what has been going on with the transit system and what has its history been. And I think one area where just recently the COG board has become more involved in the oversight of the transit system is for the first time in I believe the 4 years that I've been at the COG, Public Works has provided the Board of Supervisors with a quarterly transit report. It was agendized, and that had not been happening for at least 4 years. In talking with Public Works staff, they said over the last 4 years, they can count on one hand the number of times transit has been brought to the Board of Supervisors, and the majority of those by current staff in recent months. So I think that there's been really little focus and little emphasis, and what we're seeing is the deterioration of that system, and what we hope to do really with the organizational and maintenance analysis, not necessarily the institutional options, but really lay a framework for the Board of Supervisors or the Public Works Department, where if they accept these implementation measures and these recommendations, we'll start to see a dramatic shift. I think what the Board of Supervisors will see is with the budget that the Public Works Department has been working on with the auditor and with COG staff, I hope you start to see an immediate change in the shift in the separation of capital and operating expenditures and staff time appropriately. So I think that from my perspective, in the last 9 months, we have seen a shift, and we have been seeing staff being more accountable to the Board of Supervisors in recent months.
Okay. Okay, well, and one of the things that we suggested as the strategies is that Paratransit Services, the contractor, has a great deal of experience in this area and really encouraged the county to take more advantage of that experience as part of this contract negotiations in terms of roles and responsibilities. Paratransit Services has a very good reputation in the industry, and I think it really benefits, and they become a strong partner in the community. And so I think, that's one important consideration for you to think about in terms of keeping the status quo. On the other hand, the county overhead structure in general, compared to other options, is generally higher. 887 is actually an a federal Office of Managed Budget figure, but it essentially means cost allocation for grant administration between departments. They have interdepartmental charges. The county benefit structure is just by its very nature tends to be higher cost than contractor. And I showed you the $15 an hour difference, that's part of the difference between the two, is just the benefit structure. So the structural costs overall, trends have been negative, and the 14-15 budget had really not addressed some of the cost escalation issues. And I think, as I said before, I think the key will be in the budgeting process coming up for 15-16 and how that's addressed. The other big thing is really, and it's really for decision for you to make, is the whole capital project delivery. It's been brought many times in front of this board about the PTMISEA funds that have been available, and they're programming now. I think and again, a lot of this has happened in the last month. Some of that backlog has really moved forward. But again, it needs to be a constant priority for you to consider. And then I think transit is part of the overall county operations, and this phrase, transit is a small fish in a large pond. Well, the interim Public Works Director, Mike Miller, was basically, when I first met with him, was telling me the kind of backlog that County Public Works has in terms of bridge replacements and the dollar value, it's huge. It swamps a lot of the considerations. So again, they have a lot of things that they're working on, and really transit is a small fish in a very large pond, overall in the county. So those are things for you to consider. Do you have any other questions, comments before I move on to the next institutional option. Yeah.
I don't know if you can answer this, but within the county public works department, isn't the transit operations an enterprise fund? I mean, it's a self-contained, closed operation where it has its own revenues and own expenditures, and it doesn't feed off of any other funding source within the county, or, right?
Currently, it is an enterprise fund, and they've been, in the one transit fund, they have transit capital and transit operating. So that's one of the items that they're working on to bring to the Board of Supervisors, is separating out the transit fund. So capital won't be carrying operations or vice versa. They'll be totally separate.
Okay. And any staff time devoted towards Calveras Transit is time card in, so
Well, this will,
if you're charging 8 hours of your time, 2 hours goes to,
well, this will be the first year that they do identify Deborah and the departmental salary weighted rate. Like Cliff said, the previous years, they had a contracted Scott Dwyer. So nothing hit salary and wages object code. So that's what Cliff was mentioning, the savings. So this year with Deborah's, let's correct me now.
and so.
Correct.
Deborah, as an example, a certain portion of her cost is support for the county council, support for the city, county administrator and so forth. There are indirect costs associated with that?
Within their budget, we have direct salaries and benefits that would pay for the Public Works Transit Manager. The county also contracts for a paratransit transit manager that handles the operations day-to-day of the system. So what we're working with, within that budget, there's also A87 that's paid to the county. There's also Public Works Admin that is charged that budget. So there's a number of indirect costs that also hit that line item in addition to the budgeted salary and benefits for the county staff. So what we've been working on is because those salary and benefits hit that operations budget. It's an expense to that operations budget. And what we're really asking the department to do is look at this huge capital project delivery workload that they have and then isolate that and charge the percentage of time that's eligible for those funding sources under your capital program, and then don't allow those to continue to bring down the operations. And then really, when we talk about relying on paratransit services, professional transit experience, rely on that contracted transit manager to report and be accountable to you on the day-to-day operations of the system. And so when Cliff says we need to get really targeted and specific about roles and responsibilities, that's the conversation that we're having right now internally with the department. And so those are sort of the changes that they can begin to start implementing now, where we can start to realize a benefit potentially this year if we're successful in getting those budget amendments. I'm not quite sure if that's going to work out. But in the 15-16, combined with any maintenance savings we start to realize with more efficient buses, now we're moving again. So those are the things that we're talking about. Those are the things that we're starting to put in place. But it's really getting Public Works, I think, to think differently about how they manage the system and looking at the budget as a tool for their vision for the operation of the system. And it's really how it gets implemented and carried through. And so those are some things that we're working on, but right now those are all costs that hit the operations budget of the system.
Okay. Okay, the second alternative is basically to form a new joint powers authority. And this could be called the Calveras Transit Agency. And the joint powers agreement, which would be between the county and the city of Angels Camp, would specify that the transit agency owns, operates, and administers the public transportation system. It has the authority itself of establishing the budget, the policies, and procedures. In the other areas where this works, the board members are the same as the Council of Governments. So what happens is usually the transit agency has a separate agenda item. So you would have a transit agency agenda item, and then they would recess and you convene as the Council of Governments. So the same boards, is in the same function for both agencies. And under this scenario, essentially, the new Joint Powers Authority and the COG could contract with the county for capital project delivery and various expertises that they don't have. And one of the benefits in other agencies that I've seen, and I'm going to give you an example for Sage Stage, which is up in Modoc County, and then just close by, Tuolumne County Transit, where they actually, Tuolumne County Transportation Council, for them, is their council of governments. They then have a Tuolumne Transit Agency. They have 6 staff people in that agency, and they share staff. All 6 people work sometimes for the Transportation Council, sometimes for the Transit Agency. So it might be one staff person doing 75% for the Council of Governments, 25%. So you have a management structure. So you have an executive director who provides the management, and then the various people. So this is what Tuolumne County Transit, that's how their government, their institutional structure, that's how they operate. Sage Stage, which is actually smaller than Calaveras Transit, has the same kind of operation. So they have the Modoc County Transportation Commission, which is their council of government, and then they have a Modoc Transportation Agency that's in charge of the transportation business. And I basically quoted in the working paper the actual from the bylaws. So basically the Council of Governments establishes the needs, is there a need for public transportation, etc. The Transit Agency is responsible for owning and operating and administering the transit system. So the COG provides that. You were talking about earlier, the broad policy perspective, and then you have the agency that actually does the actual implementation, and it's part of the same agency. So this is a fairly common institutional option that others have used. So considerations that you need to be thinking about for such an option would be the willingness for a shared management leadership between the RTPA, which is the Council of Government staff, and the transit agencies. The peers that I have done work for, I did work for Tuolumne a couple of years ago, actually, for a project for services that they were implementing to Yosemite. It works quite well with a very small dedicated staff. There's the potential for, in this particular scenario, for combining the traditional bus services that Calaveras Transit provides with some of the other kind of mobility management duties that you were approving the grant application for earlier this evening, and active transportation, which is bicycling and pedestrian and a lot of other non-auto types of transportation. In this scenario, you would have to have the maintenance be contracted, which is the more common type of arrangement for small rural agencies where the contractor does both operations and maintenance. And for example, a client that I'm just finishing a project for in Lake County, that's exactly what Paratransit Services does. They do the operations and the maintenance. And so it would be that kind of thing. And then one of the benefits here would be a stronger role for the City of Angels Camp, participation and oversight, because they would be an equal partner in the Joint Powers Authority and have more of an equal voice, that's just the same as the county. So for comparable services, the cost per vehicle service hour for Tuolumne Transit is $91.55 per hour. Their actual total cost per vehicle service hour is actually less. because they operate a lot of specialized services that you don't operate, like paratransit. Some of those mobility management types of services for elderly and disabled that you currently don't operate. So their actual, and those cost delivery is less, so their actual average cost is much lower. But for similar services, it's $91.55 an hour. And then Stage, which is $70.72 per hour, they do operate longer routes, which tends to drive down the average cost per hour. But it just gives you some benchmarks to look at.
Cliff?
Yeah.
You had mentioned in Trinity County on the first option
Yeah.
that their fare box recovery is 14%. Do you have the fare box recovery for the Tuolumne County or Modoc counties? Just again as another comparative.
Let's see. I'd have to look it up. I don't have it on the top of my head.
Just curious.
I've got my computer here, so afterwards I can look it up and get you know. I don't have it on the top of my head. But I know both are above 10%. That I do know. Any other questions? Okay. In terms of, the third option is basically forming a joint powers authority. It's very similar to what we just talked about. The only exception is sort of, instead of like contracting for operations and maintenance, like you're doing right now with paratransit services, you would hire the drivers, the mechanics, the dispatchers as the employees of the Joint Powers Agency. And this is also fairly typical of different agencies around California. But I have to say that in looking at this, for example, I did some work for Nevada County in the Gold Country stage. Their cost structures typically tend to be much higher, and as the average is about $16 higher. When I showed you that earlier thing, they're, because of the county structure and all the benefits and all the costs associated with it, it is definitely a higher option. So it's not recommended as a strategy to reduce cost per vehicle service hour. The agencies that decide to do this do it for other reasons besides cost. And those reasons are that it's just, it can be a very streamlined, everything's under the control in some cases of the county where they're doing it all. In this case, the example that I wanted to give you where it's a joint powers authority is Amador Transit. They have a joint powers authority, but they hire a single professional transit manager. Instead of having the county have their own transit manager, and Paratransit Services has a general manager for the contract operations. There's a single transit manager. And they hire all their drivers, they hire all their mechanics, and but it has a higher cost structure. But they've made the choice for doing this, and it's a very well-run system. So it is an option. It is a significant transition from what you're doing today with contract operations. In an institutional structure, it would have significant startup costs. I haven't even, these are just giving you the big picture. I don't know what those startup costs would be, but they would be significant. And as I said before, the benefits are generally higher than with contracted employees. The primary benefit and reasons that agencies tend to do this is the more streamlined management structure and the accountability and control of experienced full-time transit manager.
Question?
Yeah.
Is this type of system inherent of large fleet size or compared to our operations here?
Well, Amador Transit, the example that I was giving you in Amador County, isn't really much larger. It is larger than Calaveras Transit, but not that much larger. Where the next example, any other questions on this? is where, this is for very larger transit agencies, oftentimes have, they will hire a professional transit management team. I'm doing a project right now in Brownsville, Texas, where this is the arrangement. The city of Brownsville hires the employees, hires the mechanics, and they have hired a outside firm called First Transit to actually provide the general manager and the assistant general manager for day-to-day operations. This is also the case in Tucson, Arizona. Other, like down, in the Bay Area, they have a couple of different examples where they do the same kind of thing. So here, if you're going to do it, so you basically did something similar to this when you hired Scott Dwyer to be the transit manager, but only on a very limited basis. He had a very limited contract. It was like 25% time, I believe. But here, to do this, you would put an RFP out for a transit management firm, and so the example that I'm going to use is Lake Transit, where that's exactly what they do. They hire in Lake Transit. The transit manager actually works just part-time in Lake County. He actually lives all the way down in Visalia, and he is a contract manager for both Lake Transit and the Redwood Coast Transit. He's a very professional transit manager, is on our professional industry board of directors for years, has extensive experience. But they do this because they minimize costs. Their administrative costs are extremely low, like 6%, which is well below the average. The average is more in the range of 20%. So they're able to offer more services because they've streamlined contract management with the contract. And they also contract in Lake Transit with paratransit services. So in that county, they outsource just about everything. So what it does require is a really good on-site presence of a professional transit manager to make something like that work. The considerations really would be here is that you probably want to have at least a 50% transit manager position that would be located in Calaveras County. The thing that the contract that the county had with Scott Dwyer was not sufficient enough. You really would have to have at least a 0.5 person in order to really manage it over time, in my opinion. And that's really just my opinion. There's 3 companies that provide these types of services. They typically provide these services for much larger counties. There's only one county that I know if it is a rural county where they're. So if you did something like this, the position would likely be what I like to call as a stepping stone position. They would be here for a year or two. They'd get promoted to a different, much larger agency. So you have a lot of potential turnover for such an arrangement. There's really a small market of available independent transit manager contractors out there. For another job, I interviewed a number of people asking them about this, and there's just a very limited market. So I don't know the kind of response that you get from an RFP. And I mean, one of the disadvantages of doing it is likely this particular contract transit manager would not have the kind of community ties that is oftentimes very desirable in a rural community like this. So those are some of the advantages and disadvantages for that option. Any questions on that? Okay. The final one is forming a regional transit authority between Tuolumne, Calaveras, and Amador counties. And early on in this project, I interviewed several of you on the board and asked your opinion about this because it was something that was of particular interest to the interim public works director at the time. And I got a variety of opinions on it. and I'll get into that in a bit. But under this model, it would be managed by a single transit manager. You would have local, intercity, and regional services. Right now, you connect with Tuolumne County Transit at Columbia College. You also go into Jackson, and one of the alternatives that we'll be looking at is extension of services from Jackson to Sutter Creek as part of the short-range transit plan process. So there are some already connections that you're making, and it could enhance those types of inter-county services. The main reason that Eastern Sierra Transit Authority is probably the best example recently. So Inyo and Mono counties do this together. It used to be that Mono County operated their own system, but they decided to form a joint powers authority and having a regional transit authority among two different counties because it provided good economies of scale. With Bishop, Mammoth Lakes, they have a lot of intercity services along the 395 spine. They also operate services for the ski area at Mammoth Lakes. And they had a similar situation here where they had a county employee as the manager, but they decided to go a different direction. They hired a professional outside transit manager who has just done an outstanding job there, and has, they have a very, very low cost structure, and I do know this because I just looked this up not too long ago. I mean, they have a fare box recovery ratio that's like 27% on the last I looked at. But it's part of the reason is because Mammoth Lakes, it's a whole different operating environment with a major ski area like that, which has a lot of summer activity too. It's a little different situation than here, but it is a really good example of a regional transit authority that has worked quite well. The considerations that you need to think about is really, for these kinds of things to work, there really needs to be right now, I don't see any driving forces for Tuolumne Transit or Amador Transit to consider joining forces with Calaveras Transit. It really wasn't part of our scope of work to enter into any kind of negotiations or discussions with them until it came to the board and you gave us direction to do so. But having worked for Tuolumne Transit, I know that they're very satisfied with the structure that they currently have. There's nothing driving them or wanting them to join forces. Amador Transit is a similar situation. There's really nothing driving them to wanting to join forces. So that's one thing, whereas where ESTA in Eastern Sierra Transit, there really was driving forces for the two of them to really work together. It really made a great deal of sense. Here, there's also not a seamless institutional fit. Tuolumne County contracts, Amador Transit has directly operated service where they hire the drivers and the mechanics. Tuolumne County has just gone out to bid for another, and they have another, a different contractor, and they've just gone out to rebid. So it's not an easy fit. It's not that it couldn't be done in the long term, but it's not an easy fit right now. And then the discussions I had with key stakeholders, including the board members and city staff members and county, there's a lot of range of opinions on what the benefits of such a tri-county authority would be. Some people feel there'd be a great deal of benefits, there'd be good economies of scales. Others feel that there'd be a real loss of local control, that you wouldn't really be able to control the local dollars for your local transit system. And there were a lot of other opinions, but those kind of give you a good synopsis of what they were. And again, I think the primary benefit of doing this you would have, instead of 3 different agencies having separate transit managers, you'd have a single transit manager that you could afford to, hire somebody with a lot of good expertise and experience and really have a good system. That's what Eastern Sierra Transit Authority decided to do, and it has paid off a great deal of dividends. So, those, any questions about Regional Transit Authority? Okay. Okay, so this is my final slide. It's just a summary of what works. Really, all these different institutional options that I've provided, I've worked in different settings, in different transit agencies across California. They all can work, they all can provide high quality transit service delivery. For each of these, there's good examples of cost-effective service delivery for all the options except where the city or the county manages and the city county directly operates, hiring drivers and things. Those costs are definitely higher. The key is really consistent professional transit management with the focus of the needs of the transit customer. That's the real ingredient for overall success over time of all of these. That's the consistent factor. And the governance structure really must provide attentive, strong leadership for Calaveras Transit to sustain mobility options for Calaveras County residents. That's the other really important thing. So whatever you decide to do, these bottom two things are the most critical. Okay.
Question on number 2, the exception, is that one exception where the city county does both managing and directly operating?
Yeah.
So to summarize at this point, we're not necessarily looking for a change in direction at this point. What you've done so far is to give us a status quo of where we're at right now, noting that, at least for the last 9 months, positive improvements are taking place, both with the more direct focus of Public Works and Deborah's efforts in that respect and her training.
And Robert.
That hopefully with some continued stability on the county side, that process has a significant potential to continue moving forward in a good way. That's some of the steps that I'm hearing from this. We do have some other options. However, the county currently is right in the middle of a negotiation with Parent Transit, so we have some potential unknowns. Our fiscal budget is a July to June issue, and right now here in February, I'm not seeing an urgent necessary to make a decision tonight to make any recommendations or changes, but as far as getting the tools to make note of a future agenda item to potentially say, okay, now that we've seen it, the new budget's coming up for July through June of 15-16, if we wanted to make a change, we have now the groundwork done to, I think, make an educated and informed decision should we need to make a change, or if we think we need to make a change. Again, I want to thank both the staff and yourself. You guys have put together, I think, a very cohesive and a very informed presentation tonight. A lot of work you can see has been done to put these numbers together. So I want to thank you for that.
Sure, thank you.
Any further comments from the board?
Just one question. I certainly agree with you saying that there's no urgency to move forward. It's something we should look at in the future. If, for whatever reason, it's decided to switch scenarios, and the most likely one seems to be a separate transit agency with COG, does that require this board activity, board of supervisors, city council to both agree?
And I think that is a great question. I think from our perspective, this was an opportunity for information sharing with the COG board, with representatives from both the city council and the board of supervisors. We acknowledged in the beginning of the report that any decisions affecting this information happened in a different policy arena. It's really this information we're presenting to make available to you. What the elected officials on the Board of Supervisors and City Council do with it is really up to them and their governing boards, and it is something that would need to initiate and begin with them. So I agree. I think from my perspective, the reason why this is important is because we have expectations and standards, and we evaluate and monitor the system, and we continually don't make the 10% fare box recovery ratio. We brought before this Council of Governments probably 3 years ago a request to just lower the fare box recovery ratio and say, you know what, we're not making it, we've never made it, so let's not make that a standard by which they have to meet and be penalized. This board did not support that. We got a lowered fare box recovery ratio for 1 year, and then it went straight back to 10%. The direction of this board was that COG staff was to work with the transit system, to work with the Public Works Department, and to see improvements within the system. So in order to do that, we needed to measure what was happening, how it was happening, and where there was opportunities for improvement. I think in this process, we've definitely identified half a dozen to a dozen recommendations for the Public Works Department to move forward with, and then hopefully see some improvement within the system. So I think that that is the role of this governing board. They will come to you and ask for claims to be approved, and they will be submitting the quarterly reports, and they will be reporting to you the progress on these requirements. And I think holding accountable your expectations for their service delivery is an important role and partnership that you have on behalf of both the Board of Supervisors and the City Council.
Well, we could, as a COG board, make a recommendation to the city and to the county at some point.
You could. I think from my perspective, I just wanted to recognize and acknowledgement the leadership role that the jurisdictions play in this decision, and that really they are the signatures to the JPA, and that really feeds through to us. But I think primary motivation is information and educating all of the policymakers as to where we are and what's been happening. Not making fare box recovery for, I think, the past number of years, and constantly wondering why. And I think it was really revealing to me when Council Member Stein said, this report finally tells me a lot about the transit system and what we can do to improve it. So I think that there is opportunity here. I think that you will start to see subtle changes, and hopefully this fiscal year with the work that I know Kelly and her team's been doing with the County Auditor's Office on the budget. And I think that Cliff is absolutely right. I look forward to something measurable in 15-16, so that when they come for a claim, we can say, what's the status of these projects and how far have they moved.
Can I just add one thing? As part of the short-range transit plan update, we will be establishing some goals, objectives, and performance standards. And once you adopt those standards, it's really important to monitor those standards and see, over time whether you're achieving. Now, I'm a believer in having a minimum performance standard and a target one. You can kind of see where you're at in between, or you're exceeding those standards. But it's obvious that over time, in the last 10 years, nobody's been really looking at any other performance standard than fare box recovery. And it's really important. There's a lot of other standards that you really need to look at in terms of the maintenance of the system, service reliability, on-time performance, customer satisfaction. So I will be recommending some standards that you will eventually do, and they shouldn't sit on a shelf. You need to look at it, and you need to pay attention to them over time.
Does the public have any further comments? I see Robert, you're standing there at the back. Okay.
I'm Kate Allen, citizen of San Andreas and an alternate citizen member of the COG board. I just wanted to, just throw in kind of the citizen perspective again. Living in the county and I guess being frustrated with the service that the Calaveras Transit has been able to provide. Looking at the numbers and seeing how much we're spending for vehicle service hour, and then knowing that, as Cliff said, is inhibiting the Calaveras Transit to provide more service, is frustrating. We can't ride the bus on Saturday, or we can't add routes, or, as you've seen, many routes have been canceled, or, the times on the routes have been restricted. And I see frustration from ridership that way, that we're trying to provide them a service, but they can't really use the service because it's not adequate. That's a frustration for me. So although I understand the reasoning of saying, well, there's not a lot of incentive to do much now, maybe we just keep watching it and just keep hoping it'll get better. hearing Melissa say, you know, we've had this conversation 3 years ago. We haven't been making fare box recovery. We've been hoping it gets better. We've got a great staff in place now in Public Works. And over the last 9 months, they've been able to really turn things around. And I hope that they stay, and I hope that that continues. It still just feels to me a little bit of like a Hail Mary. Like, we just hope that they stay and Deborah stays and everything keeps going good, but like, you know, we're not gonna really do anything to make it better. And that makes me a little bit nervous. I feel like, again, I do hope it continues to improve, but looking at the numbers and seeing that, well, the trend is really that it's gonna keep getting more costly, vehicle service hour. I mean, Cliff's not really saying, hey, everything's looking great, you guys are gonna be, you know, totally making your fare box recovery by next year. There's no way, this is not saying that. So we're gonna still have those problems of not being able to expand service or even offer an adequate service that more people could use in a real substantial way in Calaveras County. That's kind of disappointing to me. So that would be my only urge to the board is, yeah, we can keep thinking about it and keep watching and keep hoping, but it'd be nice to maybe be a little more proactive. It's hard for me to see Amador and Tuolumne on either side of us doing such a better job. And I understand they probably don't want to take on our project, but I wish they would, because, man, I'd love to pair up with somebody who seems to be able to offer a better service than we have thus far. So that would be my only urge to the board, is just so far sitting and watching and waiting and hoping hasn't helped that much. So, thank you so much.
Go ahead.
So, as part of the short-range transit plan, we will be doing a 5-year financial plan, which will help to drive and address some of the issues you're talking about in terms of what is affordable over the next 5 years, what can be done to address some of the service level concerns, and I think there is a need for, you know, the board to look at this and see, because there are some fairly simple things that don't really cost a lot of money to do, that the board will have to decide whether it's affordable. And that's why some of these decisions on the cost are so important, because if you can get the cost down, you can afford more service hours, as I discussed. And that will be, as part of the short-range transit plan, something that you will eventually adopt in terms of the service plan that's tied to the financial resources that are projected over the next 5 years. And of course, there's contingencies if you don't make those, but that will be an important part of the short-range transit plan update. So stay tuned.
I thank you for the report, and thank you, Kate, for your comments, because I echo much of what you say. My fear is this is going to sit on a shelf and gather dust, and 6 months from now we'll look at it again, and maybe another 6 months we look. I support transit, and I want transit to work here in Calaveras County, and we've made some changes, and I think we're going in a better direction than we have in the past, but I'm still worried about the overall kind of short-term and long-range plans for transit. And I just find for transit is, you said it there, the little fish in this big pond. I believe I see that there at the county, I see it here at the COG board, I see it with the city. It's like, here's transit over here, and, we try to do something with it, but just not enough to like get it over that hump and drive it forward. As I look at a bus, it's like, I don't think we have all the right players in the right seat on the bus, and we're not moving forward as well and as fast as I'd like to see it. I've sat on this board for 2 years, and I've heard a lot of the same repeated information, and I'm just feeling like, I'm going to lose my support for transit pretty soon if we don't take a look at this, and I think we need to do something sooner rather than later. I really see, a lot of good information here, and, we heard some key facts. I'd like to dig in more into those facts and that sort of thing. And I'd like to see, and I don't know if this is the right board or not, but I'd like to see a committee of sorts that represents, a member of the city and a member of the county and a member or two of the public or something along those lines to really dive into this report and look at maybe possibly making 1 or 2 recommendations to our respective boards. And maybe it's, you know, we stay with what we've got and we're on the right track in making it better. What can we do with that? Maybe that is the option that we go for. But I see other options in here that were very attractive, and would like to know more about and have more information on. And I just don't want to wait any longer. I think every time transit comes out at our board meeting, it's, you know, not always a happy picture, and you know, I get people in the public wanting to know why, you know, there's no service to Stockton yet, and we read about it in the paper, or why can't we have more frequent routes? And then I talk to other people that, you know, want smaller kind of transit to where, you know, you take the, you know, I don't want to say the, you know, you go down the dirt gravel road, but, you know, Sheep Ranch Road comes to mind, but, you know, where we have a smaller type transit system within the larger transit system or something. I mean, there's so many people out there who need the service that we're not able to reach with our current operation and current bus system. And, you know, I look at Amador and Dial-A-Ride, and, you know, I look at the trolley bus in Sonora, and it's like Calaveras could have, you know, a mix of all of that in some capacity. So I don't want to sit and wait another 6 months. You know, it's been 2 years already, and I can't wait another 6 months. And I don't know if this board is the appropriate one to have a committee or task force or whatever we want to call it to explore more of this information and see how it might, you know, look for our transit.
Okay, I think that is a great question and a great recommendation. And I'm trying to think of the role that the COG or that I could play in terms of convening that committee. And I think we could definitely present this information to the City Council, to the Board of Supervisors, and maybe seek your approval on the appointment of a person to that committee. And then we could work as the COG staff to facilitate those meetings, to facilitate those discussions, but really rely on your local jurisdictions to appoint the appropriate people to those committees, whether they be an elected official, whether they be city staff, whether they be a representative of the public, or maybe all three. But that's something that we could definitely work towards and maybe bring back a recommendation to you in March, with presentations going to the City Council and Board of Supervisors shortly to follow. I did hear from the Board of Supervisors when I was there handling questions on the quarterly report that there was an expectation that they wanted to learn more about what was going on with the transit system. So my sense was that they would welcome the information coming from this report.
I think so.
Robert? I'm sorry.
No, okay, that's fine. Just before you're back.
Okay.
Robert Packinger, Public Works. As the person whose department is the one responsible for transit, I felt I needed to say a few words here with this report. COG staff has, for quite some time, in my interaction with them, have told me, and we've talked about them working as partners with us, providing assistance with us in regards to the system. We welcome the assistance always, of course. Unfortunately, in this presentation, we had no opportunity for any discussions. There was no collaboration on our part with this. There was no convening. So the first time that we saw this report was on Thursday, when the report was submitted to the public. Unfortunately for me, I feel a bit sad that there is not a strong support in the report for the system as it is run today. I could point out a few areas that I feel that perhaps more work needs to be done in terms of what's presented, the information that is presented, and for example, discussions of structural costs tend to be county overhead structure is generally higher and so forth and so on. But in the previous report, also prepared by Mr. Chambers, and I could quote here from this section. It says the Calaveras County administrative cost was 12% of total operating costs. The minimum industry standard is to keep administrative costs below 15%. Calaveras County was below this minimum standard. So there's a disconnect there in terms of information. In one document, we get information that indicates that some of the practices that we're doing are okay. In another document, we have the opposite message. So mixed messages right now are a bit confusing here. The mention that transit is a small fish in a large pond is, to me, I would say almost insulting, considering that in Public Works, I have the responsibility for roads and bridges, integrated waste management, transit, equipment service center facilities, surveyor's office. That sounds like a lot of different divisions. However, each one has its discrete budget with dedicated personnel in each one. Transit has its dedicated personnel. The work that our personnel in transit is performing is, there's quite a bit of work that's going on. You know, Deborah Mullins coming to the board, here to the COG board, always making presentations as to the progress that we're making. I have no problem with facing the facts, no problem with accountability, no problem with hard work. I believe that the structure is in place to accomplish the business that transit is supposed to deliver. And from my point of view, I would like the support of this board. At this point, to some extent, it's a little bit demoralizing considering the amount of work that we're facing to deliver various bus shelters and PTMISEA projects and buses, working on budgets. There's many hours of work that we're putting into this, but, and we continue to do so, and it's our duty to do so. But it sure would be, how would you say, gas in the tank if we receive some very strong support from this board for the work that we're doing. Thank you.
Actually, Wes was next. And then-
Well, I just want to make some general statements. I certainly agree with what both Kate and Councilmember Ponte mentioned. I think we're just kind of floundering, trying to figure out where to take it from here. And in the end of your staff report, you say there's going to be a triennial performance audit that's going to be available in June, and that might lead to some additional answers. I'm not quite sure what information is going to be in that audit that Cliff hasn't already given us in more general terms. It looks like, Cliff, as you compare these different jurisdictions, in each case, there's so many different variables, and you can explain why ridership is going up, but costs are not going down because of some tweak in the system or so forth. I just find it hard to get by the basic fact that we got costs that are unacceptable and revenues that are unacceptable. And you made an earlier reference to, well, maybe with the addition of the Stockton service, we'll get vehicle hours up, which will dilute the cost per hour. To me, that's merely masking over or diluting the real problem, which is low ridership and poor management and so forth. I think it's time to embrace more significant changes in some form of these joint power association suggestions. You have maybe what we have to deal with. I like Debbie's idea of forming some form of a committee, but my fear is this is tough stuff. At least it was tough stuff for me to digest and understand. And whoever sits on that committee, I think there's going to be a really long learning curve. To get a good recommendation out of that committee, you're going to need that committee to really understand the problem. And So the people that would sit on that committee would be very important, that they understand transit and they understand how to run a business and so forth. So anyway, that's all I have to say.
Go ahead.
I'm just going to respond to Robert's comments slightly. I think, Robert, as you well know, you Public Works for the last several years, going back at least 2 years, and frankly way beyond that, is you've inherited a mess to a large extent. And I think that's where people's frustrations come from. And there have been previous attempts to straighten out the mess. And as Kate said, a lot of times those attempts have failed, so there is frustration. I'm not sure how this will all develop, and I'm certainly interested personally in looking at alternatives. But all that being said, I have heard, and I do think you and your staff should acknowledge the kudos that have been given for the changes that have been made in the last 6 months or 12 months. They've been substantial. And I think part of the reason this board may not be running out to create a new agency tomorrow is in light of the fact that you have made progress. And I think everybody looks forward for positive results. I don't think any of us are ready to bet the bank that we're going to succeed. We certainly hope we do, but if not, there'll need to be another course of action. But that does not, and I think I speak for other people, diminish the effort and the work that's been done positively.
Mike, I saw you bringing the mic towards yourself.
I'm just positioning microphones.
Okay. Elaine?
The short-range transit plan, will, according to what I read here in the staff report, is going to come forth with more tangible strategy for performance metrics and recommended target standards, operational improvements, and addresses system efficiency and effectiveness. And it'll also include a fleet replacement schedule and capital plan for 5 years. And I think having a capital improvement plan for 5 years will be something that is going to give us a lot more information. And I think the short-range transit plan is something that we need to look at and before we make a final decision on how we're going to go forward. And when will that document be coming out?
We're trying to finish things up by the end of June.
It'll be at the end of June along with the triennial audits. They'll be at the end of June.
Correct.
Then we'll have more of a comprehensive evaluation of the system. So I think that's something that's important.
Maybe to try and wrap it up at this point. What I'm hearing is definitely there's a distinct interest on the board to continue to make sure that this does not get dropped. And so I'll certainly discuss with Melissa the potential of agendizing maybe this as another item in the upcoming months prior to June to see, making sure that we're not waiting another 4 or 5 months only to find that, okay, now all of a sudden we have to do exactly what we were talking about tonight. We need to make a change. I think working with Melissa, she has a good handle and some good communications with the other agencies, as well as a good handle on probably the appropriate people to discuss maybe some preliminary benchmarks of what we should be looking towards. And so I certainly look forward to keeping this on the radar and not seeing it dropped. So I think we can look forward to seeing the SRTP being a highlighted item here in the short term as well. Any further comment from the public and or the board on this item? All right, well, thank you, Mr. Chambers, for your presentation. Do you want to take a moment and shut down your PowerPoint, or
What?
are you ready?
I think we're ready for the next one.
Okay.
So we'll go quickly to the OTF item, and I'll set up over there.
Okay, next item is item 10, resolution fiscal year 1520, approving the local transportation fund allocation request of $5,000. This is Melissa Raggio's item.
Mr. Chair. Staff is recommending the approval of resolution 1520, authorizing the allocation of local transportation funds in the amount of $5,000. This is to assist the county public works staff with technical support in renegotiating their current service contract. If I take into account the county auditor's estimate for this fiscal year, and I've already deducted the allocations that this board has approved, the remaining balance currently is $279,000. So this $5,000.
Won't hurt us.
No. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them for you.
Is there any board questions on this item? Anything from the public? Do we have a motion?
Make a motion to approve.
Motion by Councilmember Ponte, second.
I'll second.
Second by Councilmember Olivera. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0. The next item, item 11, is the fiscal year 1516 to 1819 call for projects, project selection and direction to program regional priorities as set by the council.
Perfect. Hope you don't mind that I've relocated.
This,
This way I can have a conversation with the council about this item. This is the 3-year call for projects that we released on November 2014. We did this call on a 3-year cycle. The Technical Advisory Committee met in December to rank and prioritize the projects that were submitted during this call for projects. So our goal this evening is just to discuss with you your ideas and your priorities for regional projects and funding based on the response that we got from the local jurisdictions for the call for projects. And just a little background, we issue this call for projects. The local jurisdictions the city and county staff go to their local jurisdictions, they get support for the project list, and then they submit that to the Calaveras Council of Governments. So that's how we find ourselves here. Do not worry, we'll come back with a programming request in March. And for the council members that have been on the board for some time, the programming is actually when we've got the projects, we've got accurate cost estimates, we know the estimated apportionments, the fiscal years in which we have available funding, and we're able to program those based on funding source, apportionment, and project need. So that will be a follow-up item that we're bringing back to you in March. So what's on the agenda today? We'll just do a quick recap on your past investments, what you funded historically, and where the city and county are on those projects today. And I encourage city and county staff, if you have any questions about their projects, they're here to help and provide any information or updates that they may have. And then we'll take a review of what's on the list during this call for projects and talk about what will make the cut. So we began with our past successes in 2011-12. We had an estimated apportionment of $2.6 million, and we received over $101 million in project need from the city and county. So $2.6 million available. The request from the city and county came in at over $101 million during that call for projects. I think interesting to point out, of the 20 submitted county projects, they have completed 12 or in progress for 12. They have de-obligated 2, and they're actively seeking funding that I'm aware of for 2. So I think that that's pretty good statistics for the 20 projects that they had initially submitted. Of the 5 city projects, they have completed their project study report. They are underway on the Murphy's Grade Road project. They have de-obligated one of their projects, and they used local funding to complete or at least progress on the other 2 projects. So we begin with the Jenny Lind Elementary School project. This is located at Baldwin Street and State Route 26, and it goes all the way to Jenny Lind Elementary. The total project cost was $1.2 million. The county had only asked of the Calaveras Council of Governments $59,000. This project has been completed. Caltrans has conducted their final inspection, and the county is currently looking at phase 2 opportunities in this area. I think one of the things the county wanted to highlight is what a good example this was of leveraging local, regional, and state funding. The 1226 intersection project, everybody's familiar with this project location, I'm sure. We had an initial project cost of $2.6 million. We just have become aware that we'll need to increase that project cost to approximately $3.047 million. So we'll be working on a revised programming strategy. We'll be bringing that for your approval to amend the FSTIP to accommodate that. And it's not that the total project cost was necessarily increasing, it's that when we programmed it, we didn't add the county's RIM contribution to the total project cost. And so there is a county RIM contribution that should have been added to that, and it's my understanding that now that is the difference in cost. But it is affecting our ability to obligate the construction funding. So of the total project cost, COG is funding $1.6 million in CMAQ. The project has achieved their right-of-way certification, and they are working to obligate those construction funds now. And so they're working in partnership with me so we can adjust the programming. And that is the only thing right now that's slowing up their ability to obligate construction funds. We go to the Mountain Ranch Road, State Route 49 improvements, and Government Center Bikeway. I'm sure you're all familiar with this project and location. It's my understanding that this is a $1.49 million project. It is 100% COG funded. They are in the environmental phase and they have allocated PE. And unfortunately that phase is stalled due to archaeological issues. They will not be able to obligate the construction that's programmed in 14-15. So as we work forward in the programming of new projects, we'll be reprogramming the 14-15 allocation so that it's available to the county when they're ready to obligate those funds. So these are a few of the setbacks when they come to us, give us their project schedule, give us their cost estimates. It's early in the project. They do the best they can with the information that they have, but when they encounter situations in the field, it may slow the project. We just ask that they keep us involved and work in partnership with the COG so that we can adapt our funding strategy to make sure that no funds are lost to the region. The Mountain Ranch Road Turnout Project was a $1.28 million project. The Calaveras Council of Governments has funded $283,000 in RSTP funds towards environmental and design on this project. Environmental has been allocated and completed. The county's been reimbursed from the work, and it's our understanding that the county has moved forward to de-obligate this project, and it will not be moving forward at this time. Now we move into the city projects. The total project cost of the State Route 449 Vallecito Road project study report was $237,000. And the last call, we funded about $50,000 towards that project, but it is 100% COG funded. The project report has been complete in 2014, and the city has used that information and is working with city staff and Caltrans to negotiate the relinquishment of the Vallecito Road Bridge. We've got the Murphy's Grade Road project, and the total project cost is $715,000. This is 100% COG funded. PE has been obligated. The city will not be able to obligate construction as programmed in 14-15, so we will be working with them on revising their programming strategy so that they have that construction allocation hopefully in 16-15, so it lines up with their schedule as it exists. I think that this is a great example of a regional project. This has roadway intersection improvements. They're incorporating transit improvements and bike and ped facilities into this one project. So this is our best example of a good regional project. So a little bit about what we do and sort of what our motto has been with the city and county in the last call for projects. And it was really, really successful, the partnership that we had, I think, in the prior cycle. And it's simple: plan, fund, deliver. And that is where we all prioritize our efforts and our energy. We plan because that aids us in these data-driven decisions. We had $2.6 million in available funding. We had over $101 million in project need. So how do you, as the Calaveras Council of Governments, work to prioritize these investments with such a finite amount of dollars? That's why planning is so important to us. We look for opportunities, and I think the county has been a really good example of this, of building and designing projects where they position themselves to leverage state and federal dollars. So you'll see some of those projects were 100% COG funded. They have a lot of other projects where they take very little COG resources and they maximize those projects with state and federal dollars. And one of the things that we strive for, and one of the council directions that we've had over the past year, is really to start aligning the project priorities of the local jurisdictions with the funding programs. So going to those project lists that have been approved by the local jurisdictions and saying what's happening in the state or at a federal level that we can compete for funding and bring resources to the community. And deliver. We really rely on the local jurisdictions to implement these projects, deliver these construction projects within their local jurisdictions, within their communities. So in this 2014-15 call for projects, we had just over $2 million available. We received 2.9 in requests this year, $2.9 million in requests. So that's a big difference from the previous call for projects. The process for evaluating these projects and applying for these funds was created in partnership with the Technical Advisory Committee in 2011. The goal was really to evaluate regional priorities. We wanted to see as a Technical Advisory Committee how those local goals and priorities, how do they look on a regional scale? So that is sort of the process that we work through and we walk through. I think one of the lessons that I learned in this process, and I think it's indicated by the low funding request, 2.9 million this cycle. I noticed what staff did this time is they tailored the requests that they made of the Council of Governments based on the funding availability, what I had on the table. And I think in the application process, we make available that amount. It's a little bit misleading because if I can get all of the project need, if I can get all of the city's priorities and project requests, even though it's $101 million and we laughed practically at the time, it allows me to go out and identify those projects that I know the city and county support and look for those programs that fit. If we're only submitting projects and applications for what's on the table, it doesn't allow me the ability to go out there and work to bring those resources home. So I think that that was definitely a lesson learned in this cycle. So really, we have such a simple process, and Amber is actually kind of walking through all of the pages of the application that we have here, and they've been included in your packet. So really, the only thing that we do is require that the planning documents be in a plan, a regional plan, just in a plan. And that's that emphasis and that focus on planning, because we have hard decisions to make, and it's good that these projects have gone through a community planning process. We rely heavily on the local jurisdictions for the identification of their priorities. My direction is that when these projects come to me, I am to assume first and foremost they're the priorities of their jurisdiction. These are what they want above all things. And so we rely heavily on city and county staff to work with their governing boards and their communities to develop those project lists and those priorities. We expect accurate cost estimates and schedules for programming. This will be the next phase that we bring to you in March. Accurate cost estimates and schedules are critical. Obviously, things change when everyone's in the field and they're negotiating their way through implementation. And there's usually justification for that, and there's usually a way that we can move and adapt. But we need the accurate information to program based on our apportionment, which is the money that we have when we have it, so that we could set up the best process. And then also so that we could be accountable to the states and feds and their programming documents as well. We have to demonstrate that each phase programmed is fully funded, those types of things. So it doesn't look good if we underestimate a project to get it into the FSTIP or a federal programming document and come back and say, oh, well, it's actually twice that much. So we do our best, and I think in many of the applications submitted by the county, they provide backup documentation of the detailed work that they do to provide those cost estimates. The criteria was really developed with our funding source requirements in mind. And as we said, there's a big focus on those regional results. And the criteria, though it's based on the funding requirements that we have, and you'll see in the criteria and as we walk through the projects what they were, congestion improvements, air quality improvements. We don't ask anything of city or county staff to justify that information. We simply ask, is there a congestion relief improvement? And if they say yes, then that's how we continue to work through the process. We try to keep it as simple as possible so that they don't spend too many resources jumping through hoops for us. So I think it's important at this time to kind of go back and take a look. The COG over the past, actually few years, I think more than a year, has really been looking at where we want to be. We've been preparing for these changes in landscape in terms of transportation funding and what are some strategic direction to getting there. And some of the things that the council says is that we want to emphasize the importance of planning and regional priority setting. We want to maximize the funds that flow through the agency, and we want to focus on project delivery. Quite simply, plan, fund, deliver. It's that simple. We've got the other areas, prioritize bike and ped funding, and prioritize projects that lend to economic development, community attractiveness, or bringing visitors to our area. So economic development was a new area that was just introduced to this COG arena. And then I think bike and ped funding is definitely a reaction to this shift in complete streets and what we're seeing at a state and federal level, and the COG really wanting to position projects to go after those dollars, to be part of what's trending on a bigger level. So unless there's any questions from the council on what we've funded and where we've been, I could go into the new list of projects, but just wanted to take a break if you had any questions. And then just to recap, the goal for this evening is to get a prioritized list of projects that you have. When we get to that list, I'll give more information, but it won't be to worry about the funding estimates or the programming. It's just what are your regional priorities as the Council of Governments?
Excuse me, I do have one question.
Sure.
A few slides back, under the previous call for projects, you described one or two of them as being canceled or funds being deobligated because of various reasons. Did I hear you say that once those funds are deobligated, they stay in the possession of either the city or the county, or do they fold back into COG and get re-obligated again under new grants?
So the example for the Mountain Range Road Turnout Project, it's my understanding that they began the environmental process, they've completed the environmental process. They've encountered situations in the field that prohibits them from continuing forward with the project. The COG agreed to pay for the environmental phase of the project. They've completed that. The project's not able to move forward to construction, of which they had other dollars committed to that effort. So those funds will not be coming back to the COG. They gave us the deliverable that we had anticipated, and this is a project that isn't making its way through to construction at this time. There may be circumstances, and I'm not quite sure or aware of all of the intimate details of why this project was pulled. There may be circumstances when the project is able to come back, and the county has the environmental report, and they're ready to go.
Okay.
But
and those funds are not in danger of being recaptured by the funding agency or anything?
Well, when they are deobligated, I'm not quite sure the source of these federal funds on this project, but it's my understanding that they do go back to the state or to the feds. They don't stay within the apportionment or within the capacity of the county. That is depending on funding source though, Robert, so I'm not quite sure what we had on this project.
For that project, there was a highway safety improvement program monies allocated from Caltrans, and the apportionment that was expected to be spent on construction and so forth, those monies remain with the state. It's a reimbursement program, so we didn't go into construction, we didn't incur the costs, so there was nothing there to get reimbursed from.
Sure. So the state has a bigger pot of money that they can then distribute to other regional planning agencies and so on and so forth.
For that particular project, they went straight to the county, so, and it didn't go through the regional planning agency.
Oh, okay.
So they used our funds to initiate and begin the project and the process, and then they were leveraging additional funds. And so I think that we would rather see the county, that this actually, it is a sizable RSDP investment. But I don't think I would like to see the county continue forward or obligate construction funding for a project, especially at this point, I think in the transition of the Public Works Department, and then risk having to pay those funds back to the state. So I think that they found themselves to a clear defining point, they completed a phase, and they can move forward with the project, they're safe to deobligate it, and then those funds go back to the state or the feds.
Well, like I said before, there was no reimbursement.
Yeah, well, the
So-
apportion, and so for us, I think the reason Wes is asking, because we have apportionments that come directly to our region, and then those amounts are set. And then there's the AB 1012, and we have been in the past at risk of losing those funds. And so I think the question is that money that you are still able to capture for our region, or were they specific to the project and now relinquished back to the program?
Those funds were specific to that project.
You said it far better than I could.
Okay. Okay, so we go back to the call for projects. And the first project that we have is the Oberyn's Ferry Road project. And so I'm excited to see the county submit this for several reasons. First, they're asking for $347,000 approximately. This is a project on Oberyn's Ferry Road at Dutchess Drive in Copperopolis. The funding request is for utility relocation. So one of the reasons I'm excited to see the county bring forward this request is it is on a regionally significant road. The county has contributed over $241,000 of local funds towards this project already. They've completed environmental and design on this project, utilizing their own local funds. And the total project cost is $1.38 million. And they are actively seeking construction funding. So this is an example of how the county works together with the COG to develop projects. They recognize that it's a regionally significant area, and they ask us for $347,000 while they're leveraging over $1 million project. I just wanted to point out the scoring criteria. Those are the criteria that we've provided for you in the staff report. Those are the yes/no kind of answers that we ask of city and county staff. They're the technical advisory committee. So we asked Robert, could this provide some congestion relief? Yes. Can you have a measurable air quality benefit? And he said, maybe. Is there accessibility, mobility improvements? And we identified, what those things are. It's in there in your packet. And are there other matching funds? That's how we come up with about a 5.5 of 7. Just to let you know, to be eligible for the CMAQ funding, they will have to do an emissions calculation and demonstrate before programming that these do provide a benefit. And the city and county is aware of that. This is another project submitted by the county. It's for the roadway sign reflectivity upgrade. They've requested $351,000 approximately. Through the technical advisory committee, the city and county agreed to approximately $196,000 worth of funding. This would replace the county road signs on roads classified as minor collector or higher. I need to correct that. That don't meet the retroflectivity standards mandated by state and federal regulations. It's my understanding that the city and county are both approaching a deadline on replacing these signs. So we look at how this scores in terms of that regional criteria. It is not an existing planning document. It receives a scoring criteria of 2 of 7, and it really only meets one of the COG strategic goals. The San Andreas Sidewalk Project, I think that this is another great example of how the county is working to develop and position projects. This is 1,280 feet of sidewalk from State Route 49 in San Andreas to, from Russell Road to Bellevue Road and High School Street on State Route 49. It's a gap fill project. Things that we love about this project is it is an existing planning document. It receives a high regional score. It also receives a high score in terms of looking at your regional strategies and direction. The county has only asked for environmental and design, and they are actively seeking active transportation funds for construction. So this is an example of how they're utilizing the COG funding to leverage more funding. And so this is definitely something that as the executive director I support and would want to see projects like this moving forward. I think the other thing to point out about the county and the prioritization of the San Andreas project is they went through a very comprehensive process with the Calaveras Council of Governments during the previous active transportation grant phase. They worked with the community, they worked with the Board of Supervisors, and this was voted their #1 regional priority project for that program. So they're continuing to carry that direction forward, and they're continuing to build the project so it's competitive for those state and federal programs. Next, we have the Murphy's Grade Road sidewalk improvement, and you'll probably say, wait a minute, I thought this was our shining star for regional projects, and it still is. We funded, I believe, a total project cost of $715,000. The city is coming back, they're asking for an additional $165,000. So this is for improvements that weren't eligible under the CMAQ program. And so this is definitely a project that we recommend supporting, and we want to see through its completion. It is in a planning document. You'll notice the regional scoring criteria. This one shines, it's a 7 out of 7, as recommended by the Technical Advisory Committee, and it meets all of the COG strategic direction. So, our shining star. Demarest Street at Main Street. This project was pulled at the Technical Advisory Committee level when we ranked and reviewed the projects, so it hasn't been considered for prioritization, and staff submitted it on a contingency should they not be funded for the Murphy's Grade Road project, but I'm definitely supportive of the work that they need to do to complete that project. Macaulay Ranch Road. This was also a project not recommended by the Technical Advisory Committee or me this evening. The amount requested is $145,000. It's for the reconstruction of a road from Greenhorn Creek Road to Selkirk Ranch Road within the Greenhorn Creek subdivision. So for many of you that have been to Camp's Restaurant, that is the road in front of Camp's. And it is a construction request. So it does score there. It's not an existing planning document. It receives a regional score of 1.5. You can see how we were able to rank that there. And this one, again, was not recommended by the Technical Advisory Committee.
Doesn't Greenhorn Creek, and I mean, West, you guys know this, don't they have their own roads assessment within the homeowner subdivision?
They used to, but the city has taken over maintenance responsibility for those.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next project we have is the Main Street sidewalk by the Catholic Church. So the amount requested was $382,000. City staff notified us during the call for projects that the cost estimates weren't accurate. And so what we'll need to do is, for consideration of the city projects, is work with city staff to get those accurate cost estimates and project descriptions. You know, how many feet of sidewalk, curb, gutter, that information. But the proposed project includes curb, gutter, and sidewalk from Rabobank to the Catholic Church. The request was for environmental design and construction. It is an existing planning document, and you'll see again that this scores well in terms of our regional criteria, and it meets 4 of the 5 COG strategic direction that you provided. The only one that these aren't meeting in terms of your strategic direction are project delivery. And by project delivery, we mean construction ready. So these are requests for environmental and design, the early stages of a project.
Question, Melissa?
Sure.
I'm just curious how sidewalks improve air quality.
What's that?
You said that we'll have to demonstrate air quality
Mhm.
improvements, and how, I'm just curious how a sidewalk project improves air quality.
So we'll make the case that we're removing vehicles from the road.
Oh.
And so I'm not familiar because I didn't do the model, but we just have to demonstrate that there is an emissions benefit. I believe it's CARB has a model that we can utilize to do the calculations and measure the emissions benefit. I haven't done the model. I believe we hired a consultant to do the model for the city last cycle, and I believe county staff did the modeling for their projects in the previous call. If anybody's more familiar with that from the county, you can help me out. Dave? Okay.
When we did our last sidewalk project, we showed that there was air quality mean, it wasn't very big, but at least it did show there was air quality mitigation.
So obviously that is a criteria. We do ask that before we program, that they provide us with that information so that we could program it in the EPSTIP. The Mayo Road intersection improvement. The amount requested was $55,000. It provides access from Mayo Road to State Route 49. The request is for all phases of the project. It is not in an existing planning document. You can see the regional score there of 2 of 7, and it does not meet the COG strategic direction based upon my assessment. We have another city sidewalk project, and this is the Main Street sidewalk by State Route 4. This is a gap fill project from the intersection of 449 to, I believe, Monteverde Street. So that you see the sidewalks there in front of that new professional building. I believe there are additional gaps beyond that the city is looking to fill, as well as that segment right there. The request is for all phases of the project. It is an existing planning document, and it receives a score of 4 of 7, and it does meet all of your project goals with the exception of project delivery, because it is in the early phases of project development. The next project we have is Chappelle Stairs. This is a $35,000 request, and it's to repair the stairs between Main Street and the Slate Circle parking lot. So we've got some photos there for those of you who are not aware. Those stairs go between 2 historic buildings in downtown Angels Camp. The request is for all phases of the project. It is not in an existing planning document. It receives a low regional score based on that criteria, but I must point out that it does meet 2 of your goals, the economic development, the community attractiveness, and I think increasing bike and ped facilities. Again, we have another collector road striping and stop sign replacement, a request by the city for $80,000. They are in the same situation of having to meet state and federal requirements. It is a construction request. It is not an existing planning document. You can see the regional criteria score there, and it meets 1 of the COG strategic directives. This is a project that was removed from consideration by the technical advisory. The initial request was $245,000 for a street sweeper. With the city adding all of the sidewalk inventory, currently they manually sweep sidewalks, so that this would be an opportunity for them to have a street sweeper. It is technically a construction request, so they do get credit in terms of project delivery for the acquisition of a street sweeper. It's not an existing planning document, and you can see how it competes against regional projects. But technically, I think it meets 3 of your policy objectives. So community attractiveness, economic development, I think we could make the case, increased bike and ped activity. So
Could the county use it too?
from what I hear, that is a problem for the county, is their ability to maintain sidewalks. So they might be able to use it, and they don't have the equipment to do so.
I think we have a used street sweeper, don't we?
The next project we have is Main Street Sidewalk by Cherokee Creek. So this is the installation of curb gutter and sidewalks on the east side of State Route 49, on the Cherokee Creek Bridge to that first entrance of Middleton's. There's a desire on behalf of the city or Caltrans to potentially eliminate an access point, and so this would provide an opportunity to begin a sidewalk improvement at that location. The project request was for all phases of the project. Sidewalks are in the City of Angels within our existing planning documents and many of their local planning documents. It scores well in terms of regional criteria. This was a project, though, that was removed by city staff at the technical advisory committee level from consideration. It does meet 4 of your 5 criteria.
Melissa, when you're saying it was removed by the technical advisory committee, you're not asking for us to take a look at it then this evening? It was just in the original panel?
Well, ultimately, these decisions are the discretion of the council. So the technical advisory committee makes recommendations to the Council of Governments. When we look at the minute order, we provided you the full list of projects. It's really at your discretion to prioritize these projects. I think what you're seeing here for the first time is we've gone through a process, developed a regional criteria, and I've been working with you now for about 4 years now. And I think every recommendation that's come out of the Technical Advisory Committee has matched the recommendation of the Executive Director. This is the first time that what has come out of the the Technical Advisory Committee does not match the COG Executive Director's recommendation. I don't want anyone to be afraid of that or alarmed by that. It doesn't mean that, nobody's working well together at a regional level. What it means is your city and county staff come to this regional table to advocate for their priority projects. And what they're trying to do is figure out how do they fit in a regional context and how do we get our jurisdiction's project funded. So, and then what I do is I take a look at those projects, I take a look at your direction, I take a look at the process, and I say, what is in the best interest of the region? What do these projects look like from a regional perspective? And then what's my recommendation? I think at the end of the day, city and county staff can sleep well knowing that they advocated in the interest of their jurisdictions, and I can sleep well knowing that I represented your regional perspective. So what we have on this first checklist, the regional criteria and ranked projects. So this, just looking at that criteria, a simple fill in the bubble, how would those projects have fared it out? And this is how they came out. We had Murphy's Grade Road, no surprise there. O'Byrne's Ferry Bridge, no surprise there. The sidewalk project scored really well amongst this criteria because of the congestion relief reported by the staff, because of the air quality benefit. So you can see those projects rising to the top. What you see falling in priority is the local road projects. Mayo Road, a local road project. The signs, local road projects. Chappelle Stairs, in terms of a regional perspective and picture, while that is an adorable boutique project, in a regional context, that has a hard time competing. Macaulay Road, obviously, and then the Northeast Planning Area Study. We didn't have planning funds on the table for this call, but this is an example of how I encourage the city, give me what you've got, even if it's not what we can afford right now, because now you're on my list. Now I know it's a priority of your jurisdiction, and I want to go to work to help you fund it. So what that worked out to be was about $1.4 million in funding for the city and about $753,000 for the county. So that was just based on the regional criteria. Then we go to the next table.
Before you leave that slide, what does the red line represent again?
That was the limit of funding that I had available.
Okay.
And where those regional projects rose to the top and what we would be able to work with in terms of our priority projects.
One last question?
Yeah.
It looked like all the sidewalk projects in the City of Angels included the term bike lane. Are we looking at, is that just striping outside the sidewalk area, so you have parking and bike lane and then the main road itself?
I believe so. I believe so.
Is that okay with Caltrans? Great.
So then the TAC started working, and what you see here is the local jurisdictions. If you want to go to table 2, does that pop up? So what you see here is the elimination of projects, and then you see that red bar lowering. So now we're getting the allowance and the consideration of the local projects in this call for projects. So now with the elimination of the Cherokee Creek project, with the elimination of the street sweeper, Mayo Road is eligible for funding, the roadway signs are eligible funding, Chappelle Stairs are eligible for funding. And so what ended up happening is on a county and city basis, those projects were higher in priority than what my regional process had provided for. So city and county staff said, well, we can start eliminating projects, and then that lowers the bar. What we have here now is the city total $917,000. They let us know that the cost estimates for the CMAQ projects were inaccurate, and they would need approximately a $200,000 reserve, and the county total $949,000. This is the recommendation that comes to you from the Technical Advisory Committee. They approved this, I believe, 3-1 out of the Technical Advisory Committee to recommend this to the Calaveras Council of Governments. So again, no hard feelings. This is the local jurisdictions wanting to utilize these regional funds to accomplish their jurisdiction's goals and objectives. So what did I do? I think I made things worse. Let's go to table 3. So then we look at what is my responsibility. So my responsibility is to protect the interests of these regional dollars. We've provided a process, and the process really seeks to elevate regional priorities. So I supported the removal of the city projects at the Technical Advisory Committee level. I'm not in a position to recommend the Mayo Road intersection improvement project. I question its eligibility under the RSTP exchange program, given that it is on a local road. I've checked with the district on that. My initial understanding was it was eligible for funding. I was told that it was not, but that continues to be in question whether or not it is eligible, whether or not it is not. But it's my understanding that even with the RSTP exchange funds, that it has to be minor collector or above to be eligible for funding. So if anyone, Caltrans or city or county staff has any more information, for me, this is always about making the information available to the policymakers, and then you guys call the shots. So I don't mind being wrong. But for that reason, I don't recommend Mayo Road. It's a local project. It's not of regional significance. It's not in an RTP. Also, Chappelle Stairs. I didn't recommend Chappelle Stairs. I have a hard time making a regional case for this project. I love the project. I love the bike ped component. I love the economic development component. What I would love to see the city do is go back and package this project with wayfinding, with access, with something that provides a regional benefit, and then maybe we can work on a complete project that incorporates that local need, but also addresses a regional issue. Macaulay Ranch Road, obviously that was not supported or recommended by the Technical Advisory Committee and the Northeast Planning Area. I'm grateful that the city is giving me everything they got, and I'm going to keep that on the list when we're looking at RPA funding. So no harm, no foul on the Northeast Planning Area study. So this is what I recommend is the project list. It's the 3 top projects: Murphy's Grade Road, O'Byrne's Ferry Road, San Andreas Sidewalk, the Main Street Sidewalk by the Catholic Church, and the Main Street Sidewalk by State Route 449. You'll notice I left the roadway sign retro reflectivity upgrade. Those are not regional projects. They're not in an existing plan. And they didn't rank in our process. If the council agrees to keep those projects in, it would be an exception to the process that we've created. I think really, this is a tough one for me because it's a necessity for the city and county, but I'm recognizing it's outside of the process that we've created. And if it's outside of the process that we've created, you know, where does that leave me in the next cycle when we're trying to advocate for regional projects again? But I think I look at how the city and county are trying to work to ring all these regional bells, especially the county and their project. They brought me everything I could have asked for, and they're asking for 50% of their funding request to meet this need, and it's funding that they don't have within their department. So those are on there, but I'm really leaving that up for policy discussion amongst the board in your direction, because it would deviate from our regional perspective in funding those. And then I think that then opens the door, well, if we're deviating from this process, why not Chappelle Stairs, and why not Mayo Road, and why not Macaulay? So that's the struggle that I have with those.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, John.
Well, I was just curious, does the board have questions now on the current recommended list with the strikeouts both in red and blue as presented? Jim?
Well, I guess I'll just speak in favor of deviancy for the roadway signs and the stop sign replacement. I do realize they don't fit the criteria. I don't think it's precedent setting, because these are not discretionary choices. It's unfunded mandate, which was put on the jurisdictions. Jurisdictions haven't had funding for it. So I support the whole list, but I would like, based on my public works background, to support keeping the signs as part of the list, recognizing they're deviant, but not necessarily precedent.
Chairman, question for legal. Are these sign replacements and striping projects, are they presenting any type of issue of liability to the county or city? Do they need replacing or just updating?
It's my understanding that they absolutely need replacing. I believe the county began an audit of their signs with the resources they had available, and 50% of them were out of compliance with the guidelines. I would defer, though, to city and county to provide more information on the liability of that.
One of the biggest protections that public entities have are warning signs, immunities available if there's warning dangers. So if you take the warnings away, I don't think that.
We are subject to some liability should an incident occur?
But it's a very big question. I don't think it could be, I couldn't answer it in this context.
I understand.
So this works out. Obviously, my recommendation is that we go ahead and program the county's projects as agreed upon. With the city's projects, I would like direction to work with the city staff on the remaining projects identified there, on getting those accurate cost estimates, scopes, and schedules, so we can learn a little bit more about the project, when they need the funding, and how much they need. So we still have the same amount of funding on the table. I would request direction to program the county's projects in the amount of $949, and then come back to you with the city's projects and their cost estimates. My expectation is that they would be able to utilize all of the remaining funding available on those projects identified. If not, then it is a policy question for the council. Would you allow for the city then to add projects to the list, pending no obligation from the county? Or if there are remaining funds, would you like to issue a new call for projects? I think one of the things that I want to ensure as the Council of Governments through this process is that we provide equal opportunity to both jurisdictions. That being said, the county and the city did meet, they did agree on this split, you know, the $949,000 and the remaining two city projects. So I think that that needs to be a discussion that's had. I would be interested to hear from Robert to see how he feels once we go back and revise those cost estimates, if he's acceptable to the city adding projects, should they not be able to utilize the full funds, or if he would recommend or support a new call for projects. But ultimately, that's the direction that I'm looking for. I wouldn't want to disadvantage the city or the county in this process, and I just want to make sure they have equal opportunity for the funding.
Jim?
I guess big picture, supporting your recommendation, but I would suggest if there is surplus or unallocated funds after finalization of the construction cost estimate, that it either come back to this board to approve, or it's my understanding, you told me the CMAQ funds have to be allocated to a particular project, but if the surplus funds are RSTP funds, we don't necessarily need to allocate them at this time, and that we could kind of put them in our back pocket and use it as leverage for other things that may be coming up in the next 2 or 3 year time frame. That would be my recommendation.
That is correct. If they are RSTP funds, then the Council of Governments could consider retaining those unallocated within your fund. What we were able to do last year with these projects, though, is we usually look at it being sort of a combination of funds, so I'm not certain if there will be RSTP at this time. So we take those CMAQ projects, if there's any ineligible expenditures, then we'll match that with LTF or RSTP to make the total project cost. So we sort of combined the funding sources. So at this time, it's difficult for me to tell which source it would be. But I think the direction would be to get those cost estimates, to come back with the program request, and then if there is excess, then it's the discretion of the council to decide if they allow the city to program new projects, or if we issue a new call for projects. Or we retain and fund.
Wes?
Well, my comments are really, I commend the work that you put into this. The process you've developed is one I'd support entirely. I almost wish, as a new council person and only being on this board for 2 months, 2 years, excuse me. This is my first time in this arena of this call for projects. I wish I would have known what the evaluation criteria here before we, at the city council level, selected our projects and did our criteria. I have a much better understanding now, and perhaps in the future, for future council people, they can benefit by it. But anyway, I do support your rate in ranking criteria. Like Jim, you know, monies are so hard to come by, and it's so hard to find funding sources that meet regulations and so forth. I'm supportive of leaving both of those roadway signage projects on the table, funded at both the city and the county. And I guess finally, I don't necessarily support the idea of opening it back up for adding additional projects to the list. If there are surplus funds available, I believe that when the city goes back and refines their cost estimates, in some cases, on the sidewalk projects, I have a strong feeling that the limits of the project were somewhat arbitrary. Maybe they started a project and stopped a project at a property line for convenient purposes, but a more practical approach might be to take it to the next intersection or something like that. So without adding a new project to the list, perhaps the limits of the existing projects might vary slightly. And I would certainly encourage the city or the county, if they're going to do that, to not be arbitrary in setting the limits of the project. So those are my thoughts. I certainly will support the COG recommendation.
I would like to say that I support all the changes that have been made on here. And I think it's important for the city to get with COG staff and the executive director to come up with reliable costs on all these things. And as far as the roadway sign upgrades for the city and the county, since they are state mandated, I guess they could be left in there, but I'm sure there were other avenues. I think this has been known for a number of years that these were going to have to be done by 2015. I think this is the year they're to be done. And I know that there were probably other grant funds that could be sought earlier. It's been brought up at the council, I know, in the past, and nothing was ever done, so that's why it's still there. And as far as new call for projects, if there is money available and the city would like to put in additional projects, I would support that, if the county would be in support of that. Those are my thoughts.
Any further thoughts from the board?
I'm supportive of the signage. It's a big safety issue for us, one of those unfunded mandates. So I would consider it a kind of a one-time exception kind of thing. And, money's left over. I agree with what Wes is saying. If, you stopped it because of whatever there, if you can get a little bit more out of it for the allocated funds, I'm okay with that. I think if there's any, large amounts of leftover funding, and I don't know what large is, but, coming back to COG to see if it could be leveraged for another kind of program, or maybe one program fell short and it would help support one of the existing programs that we have given the okay for. So I like the process. I commend those involved in the process, very thorough. I'm sure those sitting around the table, there's lots of healthy discussion. Can almost see it's like going to an antique auction and bidding on something. So anyway, I like that, and I agree with Wes. It's, having that criteria when these projects came before the board, that criteria is somewhat helpful to have. So I don't know if that you know, our local staff's educating us a little bit more about what that process, that COG goes through or not, would be helpful. But, you know, I like the process, very thorough, thank you.
Melissa, I have a couple questions myself. The total rent projects to be funded at this time now is 1.776, but you had on one of the original slides, you had a $2 million plus original funding. Was there a reason that the Main Street sidewalk by Cherokee Creek was pulled?
That was pulled by city staff.
It just seems like that would fill
It was pulled
the...
by city staff. I don't think that was a priority for the local jurisdiction like Mayo Road and the Collie Ranch Road were. So I think that was strategically removed to lower the funding line to include those local road projects. So that's why I believe that project was removed. It's still my understanding that the local jurisdiction, that the city has that project need, that they would still like to implement the project. So, and then I think from my perspective, then that should be a conversation with the city just in terms of priority investment and, you know, approach to these sidewalk projects then, and then creating all of these gaps on the state highway. And so then I think if they wanted to bring that project back in, then it would require further evaluation and discussion for that one.
All right. So what I've heard from the discussion so far is that we have this proposal to approve tonight the county list of staff of projects for the 949, 924, that we are approving the current list of the 827 of city projects.
Well, I wouldn't focus so much on the dollar amount because the amount we have available, the funding request will change when the city's funding estimates change. So one thing we do have locked in though is the county's total, the 949, and then we have the total call, which was 2.06 million. So subtract 949 from that, and that is really the target that the city's working to prioritize their funding estimates for the remaining projects. That is the question. If they're not able to do that, then what happens to that excess funding? And I think that when I do the programming, that's the discussion that needs to come back to the COG board at that point in time.
And it's okay with the funds and the timing that we can look at that in March?
We can. We can. So I would recommend moving forward and with the county project list and getting approval for their programming in that dollar amount. And then I'm seeking direction to continue work on the city cost estimates and project scopes, as Wes pointed out, because we don't have enough information on the project scope and description to be able to identify, which could then ultimately really zero in more on the cost estimates. But what I'm looking for approval for are those 7 projects that remain on the list: the Murphy's Grade Road, O'Byrne's Ferry, San Andreas, the 2 Main Street sidewalk projects, and what I understand from the majority of the council is the sign projects.
Okay, so I'll say that the items that are listed in black.
Correct.
Do we have a motion for the items listed in black to be approved this evening?
I so move.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any further discussion by the board? Any comment by the public? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 6-0.
And may I also confirm the direction to work with city staff on the revised estimates?
I think the consensus is please move forward with that.
Okay,
Good job.
thank you.
County report. Do we have Mr. Packinger?
We could report tremendous progress on the 1226 intersection. The right-of-way agreements have all been signed. We've received the encroachment permits. We have 2 different encroachment permits for the project. One is to remove underground storage tanks. There was a gas station in the area, so there are some underground storage tanks that have been filled with some grout. Those have to be removed. Once those are removed, PG&E will be able to come in and do their utility work. So right now, we're processing the contract for the company to remove the underground storage tanks. Hopefully, they'll be moving forward the end of February, so that then The utility company has March and April to do their work. Meanwhile, we are going forward with getting the plan specs and estimates approved by the Board of Supervisors. That's going to be happening here in the next few weeks. And then we're also working on finalizing our what we call our request for authorization for construction from the state. That then gives us the ability to proceed with construction. So we're hoping to perhaps go out with bidding for the project, March or so. It depends on how all these other funding issues line up. There's a local fund, funding from the CMAQ program, and there's a $400,000 amount that's coming also from Caltrans for the project. All of those have to be lined up. We're actively working on on that right now. So that's where the bulk of the work is concerned when we're working here with the board. There's other things that we're doing also in other projects. We're going to be meeting with Caltrans in regards to the environmental documents that are being processed for the Mountain Ranch Road Highway 49 project. That, I believe, is happening next week, so we'll be able to report something more in March.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Transit report.
It's good to stand up. Deborah Mullen from Public Works. I just want to say briefly, because it's close to bedtime, that I look forward to a time when you're all, just remember when we were worried about transit, because it's doing great, and I look forward to bringing that message to you in the very soon, so that Kate doesn't have to wait and hope, and you guys are Connie too, all of us.
Thank you,
So
Deborah.
we're working on the intercity service. We've gotten the standard agreement for both operating and capital from Caltrans. We're bringing the purchase of the bus to the board on Tuesday, and everything's aligned with Caltrans to order that bus for that, and start working on planning for where the stops are going to be and the marketing strategies for that. The bus stop improvement project was, the construction contract was approved by the Board of Supervisors last Tuesday. Wednesday, we held the pre-construction meeting, George Reed. They've already laid it out. They're starting construction. You're going to see some demo on Main Street on Highway 49 in San Andreas on Monday. So to bring you that too, and we'll be working on the shelter at La Quintana Plaza. That's going to be constructed with county crew. The new Freightliner buses, we have them, one of them in service, one we've had some ongoing problems with, and we hope to have that one ready to roll any day tomorrow. Working on some Calaveras Transit website improvements. Cliff Chambers mentioned a few times about the Eastern Sierra Transit Authority. They have a contract with Trillium Solutions to do some Google Analytics for the regional. This is why we have the trip planner now on our website. And what they've done is a good comprehensive website analysis, and brought some things to our attention. We need to do some improvements to our website to make it accessible so it can be read by readers, for people who are visually impaired to be able to see the bus schedules and use the service. So some of the things that he suggested are things that we can do in-house. Some of the things I'm trying to get TSD to do. Other things we might have to get some professional website people, but we're moving ahead with that, and it's very exciting. And I think will help with our outreach and make the system usable to more people. The Burson extension route, we're working to finalize the schedule, to working with county departments that have times of classes that people need to get to. There's some people in Burson that have some transportation needs to the county, and we hope to accommodate that. This was a need that was identified in the unmet needs system program last year. And, you have any questions? I'd be happy to.
Jim?
Confused me a little bit, you said something about the bus stops for the Stockton route. Are there going to be some new bus stops for the Stockton route?
Well, I certainly hope they won't be brand-new stops. I'd like to coordinate stops with the other agencies, San Joaquin Transit, and, yeah. They're going to be new to us, but I'm not looking to develop new bus pullouts in Stockton.
Do we have enough money for signage or any improvements that would be necessary?
We have operating funds under the 5311F funds for Caltrans, yeah. And it's going to be, the local match for that is LTF for the operating, and for the bus, we have capital funds, but also PTMI SEA for the local match for that.
Deborah, I wanted to ask where we are in terms of the programming and delivery for the city's bus projects.
Still working on the allocation request for PTMI SEA.
Okay.
Thank you, Deborah.
All right. Thank you, Deborah. City report. And him. You got a thick packet with you.
I know, this is your agenda. Dave Hannon, Director of Planning and Building for the City of Angels. Report on a couple things. One is regarding the PSR. We're in the final stages. We'll be working with Grace McSayo on finalizing the relinquishment of the bridge, so we'll be going through the steps to go through that process. So met with her, and we're continuing dialogue to get that started. In regards to Murphy's Grade Road, we've got a design, a little bit of a design so that I can go out for the environmental. So I'll be looking to go out to an RFP to do the environmental on that project. So hopefully we'll get that out here in the next month or two, and then hopefully get an environmental consultant on board by the end of March, or no, probably more like the end of April. So to get moving on that. Also wanted to let the board know that the city, in terms of transit, the city is getting more involved in the transit agency. We're meeting with the county staff monthly. Just kind of give you an idea of, just us getting together, seeing what's going on, maybe another set of eyes on the issue. So just staff to staff at this point, and because we do have a play in this game, and so we want to make sure. And I've been attending Board of Supervisor meetings when there are transit items. I know some of you probably see me in the audience, and we're attending those when there are transit issues on the table. So the city is starting to step up, and because we haven't, the county's been doing it, and we've been watching, and so now we're paying more attention and working with city staff or county staff, and it's been a good couple of meetings that we've had 2 or 3. So we're getting into it. So. All right, and unless you have any questions on any projects, I'd be happy to answer any of your questions. No? All right.
Thank you very much. Mr. Goodneys to Caltrans.
Holy mackerel. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John Gedney, Caltrans District 10. I'd like to try to address a couple of the questions that came up on that project list, and I'll try to be brief.
Thank you.
I'll try not to speak as fast as Dave, but if I do get too carried away, please stop me. The department is recognizing that we can't do things the way we used to do. We have a new mission and vision. We don't know how to get there yet, but we're trying.
You still fix roads, right?
We still fix roads.
Okay.
We do still fix roads, and that's actually a priority that we're working more toward.
Okay.
We're going to a fix-it-first mentality, because as I've mentioned before your body, we're out of money. There was a presentation in Sacramento just today, all day long. All the top people in the legislature at Caltrans were discussing, Will Kempton, the new CTC director, talking about ways that we can find new funding sources. But we also know that in order to make the case for that, we have to walk the talk, and we have to become more performance-driven, more accountable, more transparent. And that's in our mission, and our new vision talks about meeting new challenges through leadership, innovation, and teamwork. And that leads me to commending your executive director and your staff. I'm constantly impressed with your leadership and your teamwork. And as an example of that, Melissa convened a group of executive directors of your colleagues here in the RTPAs in the mountains, Amador, Alpine, and Tuolumne all marched down to meet with our District 10 Director and his executive management staff to present in a very finite and a very controlled environment, an hour or so. How much time did you have with him, right?
Yeah.
You had to really condense your issues into what was primarily important for your regions, and it was a very effective way to develop that teamwork and that collaboration that we have to have. That leads me to your issue on the bike lanes. We typically and traditionally, it will come to no surprise to any of you that we work through standards and specs, very rigid, we're in a box. So when these kinds of questions come up about, you just mentioned to me, do we approve these bike lanes? Historically, our operations staff and our safety staff would have some heartburn with it. But we know it meets our new goals of complete streets and Main Street context-sensitive solutions, working in collaboration with local partners. And so I think the message is that when we develop really good partnerships, we want to work to try to find a way to get this done. And that's my commitment to you and to Melissa, that you want to try to find a way to make sure those bike lanes get approved, and we'll try to work. We need to work to find a way to overcome some of the obstacles that we've had in the past. Same thing with the signs. I know you've asked the question of local assistance. Are these eligible for expenditure with the RSTP monies? We need to work to make the case. If it doesn't meet that criteria, there's other reasons why we need to have them in place. There's liability exposure. It's a safety issue. We need to start building those kind of relationships together and making the case together. So I just want to thank you for that. And then finally, it's been really interesting to be on this new 449 Partnership Planning Grant, another example of collaboration. There was a lot of conflict as that medical clinic project came through. But we convened this planning grant, and for those of you who were at the forum a couple of weeks ago, I thought it was very illustrative that the question that was asked of the audience members, is this the right path to go on, right, Jim? And how many of the attendees, of 67 attendees, it was near unanimous.
About 3/4 said it was very, very good, and most of the other quarters said very good.
Right. I think maybe 8% disagree. And there's always the naysayers, right? There's always the ones that are going to vote no on anything. But the point is, they all thought that this was the right path to go down to try to resolve this long-standing problem. And it all has to happen through collaboration and partnership. So thank you for that effort there. And our commitment to you is to try to live up to our new mission and vision. So with that, I'd just like to answer any or address any concerns you may have, and anything I can bring back to the department for more information, I'd be happy to do so.
I do.
Yes.
John. There is a recent issue that was brought to my attention, and talking with Melissa, and I know she's kind of fanning out to folks, but at Appaloosa in Highway 4, it's a real safety issue there, as we know, and we've identified it with the wagon trail and such. But here lately, because of the deterioration of the pull-out lane there and the site, or the lack of site that people have, I'd like to maybe talk with you, follow up with you on this particular project to see if there's any kind of something very short-term that Caltrans could do to improve the safety of that particular area until we have the wagon trail more defined and that sort of thing. But I see it as a safety issue for folks pulling in and out of there, as well as the bus and the pull out of the school bus in that particular area. So I don't know what mechanism to kind of follow up, but I'd like to kind of bring that to your attention and see if there's any way we could go with that particular.
Very good, very good. Melissa and I can work together to contact our safety engineer, write a letter from the COG, and I can let him know this is an issue that we'd like to talk to him about. He's pretty good about responding to this and going out and performing a safety investigation.
Okay.
The more detail he can provide, the better. Photos, things like that.
Okay.
And
Yeah, the CSD out in that area, their board voted this as kind of their #1 priority. So
okay.
Anyway, I'll share that
Melissa and I
more
can get right on
information.
that for you.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else?
Mr. Gaddy, you're not leaving right away, right?
It's only 9:45.
I brought my jammies.
I'd like to say hi to you.
Okay.
All right, thank you,
Thank you,
John.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Hannah, welcome
I
back.
forgot one thing. John kind of stole my thunder on that, but I wanted to bring, I forgot about the partnership planning grant. And so far, we've gone through our first set of public meetings, stakeholder meetings, advisory committee meetings. We've gotten, as John said, and of course, probably as Amber or Melissa can concur, is that we've gotten great turnouts. The website Survey Monkey thing got a lot of turnout. We're entering the next phase. We've got an administrative draft for an existing conditions report, and we'll be working through our committees again and looking forward to another public meeting in April, I think is what we're looking at, hopefully, based on everything that we're doing. So getting to the next step of this, and so we're getting to hopefully put some alternatives together and go through the process again of public outreach and public output. But so far, it has been a good working relationship between the COG and Caltrans. I have to say Caltrans has been a good partner in this so far. All right, so far. And working with the consultants groups, they're doing a great job. And so again, that's I wanted to remind everybody about that project too. So thanks.
Okay. Staff reports.
So I just wanted to thank Jim Heminger. I had direction from the COG board to meet with the RCRC group, and he facilitated a meeting with Mary Pitto, Paul Smith, and Randall. And so that was a great opportunity to put names and faces. So I just wanted to thank Jim for helping to facilitate that COG direction. And I think it opened a line of communication, so now I see Randall frequently at meetings, so that's great. And then also, Paul had an opportunity to give me a call and see how we felt on an issue that was affecting other rural counties and what our stance could potentially be. So it's definitely opened up a line of communication, so thank you to Jim on that. Also, I just wanted to say that I was really excited going down to talk with Dennis and his executive management. The vision and the mission, I think, of the district was pretty motivating and inspiring, and I felt really good walking away from that meeting. I provided an attachment of the topics that we went over with the district, and you'll see things that look familiar, things that are your goals and objectives are also your neighbors' goals and objectives. They're working on wayfinding, they're working on Vision Sonora, they're working on things to enhance economic vitality. So it was just an opportunity to really say we don't stand on these issues alone, we stand together, and I felt Caltrans saying we're with you. And one of the things that really kind of motivated me is hearing the district director say we want to break those silos, we want to look for whole comprehensive projects. It's a major cultural change and shift for the district. So I think just hearing acknowledgement of all of these struggles that we have at a local level, and I felt with Dennis Agar's leadership that he's reaching out and he's meeting us at the local level, and that felt really good. So my thanks really to the district. And that's all I have for the council today.
Ms. Raja, you yes or no?
Yes, I do.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to update the council quickly on our annual PDA financial audit. Today, the city, county, and COG staff all has reviewed and made final comment. The audits will be coming before the council at the March meeting. And then on the next item, I was asking for council direction on the triennial classification and compensation study. Our draft overall work program is due to Caltrans on March 1st. This item is a discretionary item for the council. It is in our policies and procedures manual. Our last class and comp study, the life of that project was about 20 months. But like I said, this is at the discretion of the COG. We just finished the last one in December of 2013. So if you would like me to postpone or revisit this next year, it's totally up to the council.
So basically, the class and compensation study was not a requirement of the revised JPA in 2011, but it was a requirement that was included in the development of the policies and procedures manual that we conducted triennially. We recently conducted it. I think staff is safe recommending that there are no changes to the findings or the information of that report, and that the information would still remain valid. We don't feel necessary, but it was an expectation imposed upon the Council of Governments in the development of those policies and procedures. So we just seek your direction as to whether or not you would like us to begin that process again.
I think it's not an agendized item, so to take action, I'd rather see it as an informational for tonight.
We can do that.
And then maybe agendize it for action in the future.
We can do that. We're happy to bring it back.
Is that,
Thank you.
that's it? Mr. Jones?
No way.
Amber?
Nothing else to.
Carly?
Good night.
Nothing further from the staff. Council reports. Jim?
I did go to the Angels planning meeting, very informative and actually very positive, so I was very glad I went. And just a follow-up to some of my former RCRC colleagues, Melissa made an extremely favorable impression for COGS.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. They were
Thank you.
very impressed.
Well, I have good mentors to follow, Jim.
Hopefully, they'll do some good work for us.
Debbie?
Nothing for me.
Would you like to say anything?
Yeah, for the benefit of our folks in the audience, I'm the alternate council member here. Steve Kearney is the actually assigned with Councilor Pawnee. And I found this very, very educational. I intend to attend meetings as an alternate when our representatives are here also. Keep my finger on the pulse, and I thank you very much for putting up with me. I have a lot to learn when it comes to COG.
Well, thanks for being here.
Yes.
I attended the planning workshop too, the transportation. It was very interesting. That's all I have.
Just a couple of things. First of all, I'd like to introduce our newly elected council person and alternate representative to COG, Amanda Follendorf, is with tonight for the first time. And then, where did he go? Councilman Soban, who is another alternate to the COG board, is a regular fixture here, and I think you all know him. But and then the only other comment I had was to echo what John Gedney, Dave Hannum, and Jim and everybody said. I attended 2 of the advisory committee meetings on the 449 corridor study. Both of those with the participation of Design Workshop, the group out of State Line, Nevada. They're very good for those that attended the public workshop. I think you know what I mean. They use little handheld voting machines, and it has a way of engaging everybody in the audience and participating, and they can participate anonymously and they don't feel threatened by what they say. I think it's a really innovative idea. They had a good turnout at the first workshop, and I think we're going to, good things in, good things out. I think we're going to get some real meaningful recommendations that come out of this process, and I look forward to them.
I just want to say thank you very much, Council, for your confidence in asking me to be your new chair. I look forward to serving you this year. I will state as a goal not to have meetings run close to 10 o'clock. I will try to make it a little shorter. I also want to thank you guys for having Elaine be our co-chair. I'm looking forward to the expertise and
I also
willingness
want
to
to thank
assist.
everyone. Just so long as I don't have to do anything.
And so with that, our next scheduled meeting of the COG will be March 4th on 2015 at 6:30 p.m. here also. And we'll adjourn the meeting at this time. With the motion.